Hello guys, yo, this is your boy Shrimp once again, back to you again for more sketches and adventure through the Dead Mage who doesn't want a fourth time. So yeah, here we are back again for this adventure and sketching. I didn't know why I did that, but anyway, let's go back to this, let's continue this stream where we left off. Finish these two sketches for today, and hopefully, if I can have more time, I'll add some few more a new folder for new a new batch of sketches. It will depends on my schedule also, but for now that was the plan. But yeah, to continue this, I'll make this chibi-like character over here, then the samurai. hmm And yeah, so far from our last sketches, from the ogre to the dwarf, this separate-looking guy, the old man, and the skinny pirate dude or navy. I don't know. We not very sure. And the cyborg panda over here, and this witch that's performing some sorcery, cool sorcery. If I would pick a color for this, it will be green. I think green flames. Yeah, I'll make it really eerie. Probably some blue skin, purple dress, white hair. Yeah, that would look really nice. Okay, and this character, now that I've been looking at it, she does look kind of bit of a coroni, don't you guys think? Yeah, she has that look, the perfectionist look. hmm I think the shoes is kind of big, but it acts like a bit of a flavor on the style. So yeah, that's okay. So we're heading on to this chibi girl over here, and proceed with the samurai afterwards. Let's see if I can do this really quick and precise. I oh I actually forgot to look out some ideas in Pinterest. Dang. No. Okay. I'll probably just check it out later. Sorry guys. uh but I do have some few more personal savings here in my Pinterest, so I'll just look if I can see some. Mm, yeah. Okay. So yeah. Anyways, back to the fourth mage who doesn't want a fourth time. We're at chapter, I believe in chapter. Where is it? Chapter 68. Okay, guys. Once again, you can check this story if you want to continue it, or you're haven't catch up to this yet. You can actually check this in the Novels.pl website. It's a very good website where you can go check out a lot of different kinds of light novels, web novels, and other stories that you want to listen to or read to on your own. And so here we are in chapter 68. So more about Vandal's adventure right now, because he just finally got out from his um, what's his kingdom again called? His current uh, yeah, the country of the Titans. He just came out from that place, and now he's going to the Hardna Duchy or something, and exploring the place, finding out the new world that he has been living on. So he'll probably interact with some people. We don't know what will happen in this arc. Let's just see. But there is also some few issues where the gods have finally noticed him. Even some few vampires that are planning and plotting for ways to assassinate him. And for the main Rod Courtney, yes, the god Rod who is now reincarnating some of his some of the dead people from the other planet so that it could hunt him down. Because he's the main reason why this is happening right now. Because he resurrected Vandally. He never double checks about uh, his work or something. That's his problem. It's a kind of a stupid way for him as a god to do, because things should be perfect because of yeah, it's a grand design where life is being processed, so he should be doing a double or triple check of that kind of system, and yet he made a blunder with Vandaline. He didn't double check that the soul that he was resurrecting was actually a former soul from that planet that was combined with other three different souls fragments, and now he has this hybrid Dampier who just like can destroy souls. So it's backfiring at his plan right now, and yeah. Without any further ado, let's just continue with the story. And with me sketching here, I'll probably look some few references before I start. So enjoy the story while I'm searching for some references. Sorry again, guys. I will do better next time. So yeah. Anyway, let's proceed with the story. I'll talk to you guys later.
Chapter 68, The Hartner Duchy has gone through a decline. The levels of the unarmed fighting technique, venom secretion, claws, fangs, tongue, and blood-sucking skills have increased. I see. This city had already become the Goblin King's stronghold, said Vandally. Still, you're pretty impressive, Zran remarked. To think that you'd be able to take down a disaster-designated monster on your own. I wanted to see King going wild, too, said Braga. No, it wasn't really that special, Vandally told him. That evening, he and Eleonora, who had regrouped with the ninja unit, were having a hot pot together. After Vandally had approached the city, he had fought the goblins in earnest. He used out-of-body experience and spirit form to divide himself, used the materialization skill to materialize his body parts, fired death bullets all over the place and slaughtered the goblins with his claws while running endlessly around them. It was a one-sided massacre. He had used Golem transformation to create stone golem allies from the city's walls as well, so every single goblin was turned into a silent corpse. In addition, he didn't have to think about finding female goblins that could become partners for Braga and the other black goblins. The black goblins didn't understand the goblin language, and because black goblins resembled humans far more than goblins, their sense of beauty wouldn't match. It wasn't anything amazing, said Vandally. It was only 1,000 goblins. For normal people, that would be pretty amazing, Zran told him. That's a number that even a class adventurer would run from if he was on his own. Well, you know, I'm not really normal, Vandally pointed out. Yeah, King is amazing, said Braga. 1,000 goblins led by a goblin king. The pack of goblins under the Goblin King's rule had still been small, but a normal adventurer or even a party wouldn't have been able to challenge them. Though the Goblin King's strength and followers' skill was likely still low in level, it would still strengthen the goblins beyond their normal abilities, and under the king's rule, even cowardly goblins would become reckless soldiers willing to sacrifice their own lives. However, these had proved to be enemies that Vandally could defeat one-sidedly on his own. He was vulnerable to enemies who possessed enough power to break through his impact-negating barrier or his magic absorption barrier, but he was essentially invincible against enemies who couldn't break them. Keeping his physical body and soul protected inside his barriers, he had left the outside fighting to his spirit form clones. With Vandally doing this, it was impossible for goblin soldiers and generals armed only with rusted weapons to deal him a fatal blow. Though the goblin kings and mages did their best to defeat the clones, they inflicted pain that Vandally considered to be tolerable, and he could simply make more clones again immediately afterwards. With the remaining stone walls of the town turned into stone golem allies for Vandally, even escaping was difficult for the goblins. As a result, the Goblin King and his pack were annihilated after managing to make Vandally use only 10 million of his mana. Vandally had even recovered the majority of that 10 million mana with his automatic mana recovery skill and by using blood-sucking on the Goblin King. But Vandally-sama, couldn't you have defeated them faster by using disease? Asked Eleonora. If Vandali wanted to, it was possible to quickly produce the pathogen that caused the disease that he had used on the Mage Shield Nation's army in the defense of Talersheim last year. If he had used this, the non-black, normal goblins would have instantly become unable to act. They wouldn't have died immediately, but Vandali would simply have to finish off the collapsed goblins as if he were performing some manual labor task, so it wouldn't have even been a battle. But there was a flaw with this plan. That's true, but it would have been troublesome if there were people that the goblins had captured, said Vandali. Well, there weren't any, though. Like orcs, goblins sometimes kidnapped women and used them as tools to birth children. Vandali had taken this possibility into account, but fortunately this pack hadn't been keeping any women captive. They had signs of life that could have been captive women, but they turned out to just be female goblins. How prudent of you to consider women who might not even have been there, said Eleonora. I think it's normal to take that into consideration, Vandali told her. But don't stop praising me. Delicious meals and the admiration of others is the richness of life. Physical contact would make it even better. Yeah, you did good, said Zran. You're great, King, said Braga. As the three of them patted his head, Vandali recovered from the disappointment of the failure of his first visit to an area inhabited by humans. He turned the goblins that he had killed into zombies and everyone began preparing to make camp. Vandali didn't really like the idea of using the houses that the goblins had been living in, so he used Golem transmutation to construct familiar-looking pit dwellings out of suitable wood and stone. It was summer, so 10 of these would probably be fine. Incidentally, Vandali had broken the Goblin King's limbs and left him at death's door for Braga to deal the finishing blow. Braga did gain some experience points, but despite being a king, it was only rank 4. It didn't provide enough for Braga to level up. Still, what a waste, said Zran. If you'd defeated the Goblin King after becoming an adventurer, you would have climbed up the classes all in one go. Are they really that amazing, these Goblin Kings? Asked Vandali. Well, they are, Zran told him. If a newbie who had just registered were to defeat a Goblin King on his own, I think they would be promoted from G-class straight to E-class, and they'd probably be allowed to take the D-class promotion exam right afterwards as well. Oh, so they're more amazing than they look, said Braga, looking impressed. As expected of another king. Wow, I feel like I just missed out on a lot, said Vandali as his shoulders dropped. A newbie who had just registered at the guild, defeating a Goblin King alone. It would be incredibly big news, an achievement that would linger in the memories of even those who weren't adventurers. In fictional works that Vandali had seen on Earth, there were plots where the protagonist would suddenly achieve something great and make a striking debut. This could have been possible for Vandali. If he had done it after registering as an adventurer, that is. I mean, we're supposed to be leaving the city quickly, right? You wouldn't even have time to sit the exam either way, Zran pointed out. That's right, said Eleonora. And you defeated such a great enemy before you even registered. I'm sure you will be able to achieve something just as great soon enough, Vandali-sama. I suppose you're right, said Vandali, feeling a little better after being comforted like this. But the city was beyond undergoing a decline, it had become a home for goblins. Why is that, I wonder? The Hartner Duchy does still exist, doesn't it? Yes, there is no doubt about that, said Eleonora. This is my first time coming to the Orborm Kingdom as well, but something like the destruction of an entire duchy would be news that would travel to the western side of the continent. And judging from the state of the ruins, it seems that the city disappeared a long time ago. I've only been to this city twice as well, but isn't it because the commercial trading with us stopped? Said Zran. But even then, there's an even larger city to the north and a mine to the south. You'd think that it would still get by as a place where people stop in between. Then maybe the city became impossible to maintain because of monster rampages, Braga suggested. Yes, that could be the reason, said Eleonora. The same thing has apparently happened before in the Mage Shield Nation as well. Vandali had once heard from Kuka that after Talersheim was destroyed by the Mage Shield Nation, the monster population had no longer been kept in check by the Titan adventurers, so some monsters crossed the boundary mountain range and caused damage to the Mage Shield Nation. The same thing had likely happened to the Hartner Duchy. As Braga suggested, it was possible that the Duke had become unable to maintain the city, leading to its abandonment. I see, no wonder the area around the city had turned into a semi-devil's nests, said Zran. They weren't able to keep the monster numbers in check. Incidentally, the difference between devil's nests and semi-devil's nests is the extent of mana pollution in the soil. Lands with mana pollution so severe that normal plants and animals living there would turn into monsters and monsters would spontaneously appear are referred to as devil's nests. The presence of produce that only grows in devil's nests, such as cobalt fruits, is also a requirement of being classified as a devil's nest. In order to convert a devil's nest into normal land that doesn't produce monsters, forests need to be cut down and swamps need to be filled in. Things that can easily contain mana must be removed and clergymen from the church are needed to purify the land. Semi-devil's nests, on the other hand, are simply lands that multiple monsters have begun living in for whatever reason. For those making use of these lands, they are essentially the same as devil's nests, but once the monsters are all hunted down, no more monsters appear. Afterwards, they can be used just like any other forest and marshland. With this logic, Taylorsheim and its surroundings was a splendid devil's nest, with its crops turning into monster plants. But nobody minded. "So, what are we going to do now?" asked Braga. "Are we going back to Taylorsheim?" "No, let's go and see the city to the north," said Vandali. "It's more promising than the mine to the south," said Zran. "Since 200 years have passed, it might have run dry and stopped being mined by now." "Eh? Do all veins run dry in this world?" Vandali asked in surprise. "King, it's only your veins and dungeons that don't," Braga told him. It seemed that Taylorsheim was in a truly blessed location. The next day, Vandali turned the well water into aquagolems, which resembled slimes, to remove it while the black goblins cleaned the well so that Eleonora and the others could wait here while he went to the city. He quickly set up some walls, watchtowers and traps with golem transmutation before heading towards the highway that the goblins' spirits had told him about. He found walking to be bothersome along the way, but unlike yesterday, he decided to build his body's strength by running on all fours, using his claws to provide grip on the ground's surface. Once I registered the guild, and Bikuuman Adventure Vandali sang this rhythmless tune as he ran along on all fours for around half an hour. He finally found the road. It was a crudely built road that would cause carriages traveling along it to bump up and down, but it was clearly man-made. Realizing that this was one of the highways of the Orborn Kingdom, he stared at it for a while. As he took his first step onto it, he raised his arms in celebration, and then froze. "Traveling alone feels empty," he whispered to himself. He had tried singing to himself and firing himself up meaninglessly, but these couldn't fill the void. The feeling didn't last. Vandali had been alone in his previous life and the life before that, but in Lambda, there had always been someone by his side. Because of this, he had completely lost his resistance to feelings of loneliness. There were over 1,000 spirits floating about in Vandali's surroundings, however. But as spirits, their personalities had gradually deteriorated. Thus, the spirits led by Vandali, including the goblins that he had killed yesterday, were simply tools to use for golem transmutation rather than companions. If I don't hurry and get to the city, I'll probably end up making undead just to have someone to talk to. So, from here, north is this way. Using the sun as a reference to get a sense of direction, Vandali began running. After he continued running for a while, he suddenly noticed a scent on the wind that stimulated his hunger. "This is the smell of blood. This stink is goblin blood. No, there's human blood mixed in as well. It's goblin blood. No, there's human blood mixed in as well." It seemed that there were people and goblins fighting up ahead. "All right, let's go and help them." Vandali used flight to float lightly into the air, and then began flying forward at great speed. He didn't know whether the adventurers or soldiers who were fighting were struggling, but even if the battle was going favorably for them, wouldn't they be friendly towards him? That was what Vandali thought. As usual, he had no confidence in his ability to communicate with those who were unaffected by his death attribute charm. Kasim stopped the club with his shield and brought it crashing down on the club's owner. "Eat this. Shield bash." The goblin soldier screamed as the shield slammed into his face, sending it flying backwards. However, its place was quickly taken by another goblin soldier. "Oi, Kasim. When did you learn how to use shield bash?" "I just shouted the martial skill's name. It's not like I can actually use it." "That's what I thought." The shield bearer in training Kasim, the swordsman in training Fester and the scout in training Zeno formed a three-man party. Because goblins had been appearing more frequently on the highway between the village and the mine, this party had been hunting them to reduce their numbers. The three of them had just graduated the adventurers' school and become Me-class adventurers, but they were confident that they would be able to exterminate goblins, even if they appeared in large numbers with 3 or 4 goblin soldiers. But they hadn't expected over 14 goblin soldiers to appear on a highway that wasn't even part of a devil's nest. On top of this, there was a particularly problematic goblin shrieking orders to the others. It was a rank 3 goblin barbarian, one of the newbie killers that the adventurers had learned about in the adventurers' school. What is a goblin barbarian doing in a place like this? I didn't sign up for this. Everyone mistook it for a goblin. This is why they're newbie killers. If examined closely, it is clear that goblin barbarians have more developed muscles around the neck and limbs, but from afar, they simply look like slightly thicker goblins. And in the majority of cases, their weapons are tree branches used as clubs just like other goblins, only a little larger. Because of this, many newbies approach them after mistaking them for normal rank 1 goblins, only to be beaten to death by their overwhelming strength. It's still better than a goblin mage, isn't it? Those are newbie killers as well, said Zeno. The contents of a goblin barbarian's head are no different from a normal goblin's. Even the goblin barbarian that was in charge now seemed to not have given any orders other than, "Don't run away," and, "Fight." Zeno, you're right, but trouble is trouble. No matter what happens, they won't run away. Fester finally managed to cut down a goblin soldier, but the next goblin soldier stepped forward immediately to take its place. He had already cut down 3 of them. Goblin soldiers were smart enough to run when they thought that their chances of winning were slim, or if they thought that victory would come at too great a cost. But the goblin barbarian's head was filled with nothing but the idea of fighting. And since the goblin soldiers feared the barbarian far more than Kasim's party, they weren't running away. "Oi, do you still have mana left?" Kasim asked his companions. "If I use provocation and either stone wall or stone form, I'll be out." "I can use 3 more martial skills," Zeno replied. "How about you, Fester?" "I only have enough to use single flash twice," said Fester. It is difficult to say that non-Mage class adventurers have abundant mana pools. Kasim prepared himself, knowing that it would be difficult to come out of this situation alive on their own with their remaining mana. At least they were all fortunate enough to be men. At worst, they would all be killed here, though they would probably turn into goblin food afterwards. They wouldn't feel anything as long as they were killed first. "Zeno, Fester, I'll draw the goblins' attention with provocation. While I do that, you guys run," said Kasim. "Kasim, what are you trying to? There's a barbarian on the highway. There's definitely a large pack of goblins nearby. You need to let everyone in the village know." Kasim raised his shield. The goblins had grown tired of attacking, but they were unwilling to allow Kasim's party to escape. The moment Kasim tried to use his shield technique martial skill, provocation dash, far behind the goblin barbarian, there was a child carrying a large amount of luggage floating in the air. That child was silently flying closer, swift as the wind. Iron Rend. He swept his claws across, easily decapitating the goblin barbarian. What? Jai? The goblin barbarian screamed as its head flew off and blood spouted from its headless corpse like a fountain. Kasim and the goblin soldiers stared blankly at the white-haired child that was floating in the air on the other side of this blood fountain, making it difficult to believe that this was reality. If you're going to attack the goblins, I think now is your best chance," the child vandally advised Kasim's party, who were still staring at him blankly several seconds later. "Jeju? Yeah? Jeju?" Kasim's party used the mace, sword and knife in their hands to beat down the dumbfounded goblin soldiers. There were some goblins who had regained their senses and tried to flee, but they fell before Vandali, who casually swung his claws at them, and all of the goblins were safely eliminated. "Sorry I'm late. My name is Vandali." "Ah. You saved us." The A-class adventurers were bewildered by Vandali's polite self-introduction. White hair, candle wax-like skin, doll-like facial features and a clear-sounding voice. All of these contributed to his doll-like lack of presence. It was as if he had a phantom-like air about him, and he would vanish if touched. The only vivid thing about him was the blood-stained, knife-like claws extending from his thin fingers, but these were his most unbelievable feature for Kasim and his companions. Vandali had sliced through the goblin barbarian's muscle-packed neck with these claws. The neck of a monster that was significantly stronger than them, feared at the adventurers' school as a newbie killer. Who is this guy? Nobody could blame them for having their minds completely occupied with this question. Vandali-san, Kasim began. "You don't have to use the honorific," said Vandali interrupting him. "Kasim-san, you are adults, aren't you? In the world of Lambda, humans in most regions are treated as adults from the age of 15. Kasim and his companions looked to be in their late teenage years to Vandali. In fact, the 3 of them were young men who had graduated from the adventurers' school and turned 15 this year. "Really? Well then, Vandali, what are you?" Kasim asked. "Kasim, he won't understand what you're asking him if you say it like that," said Zeno. "In other words, he wants to ask who you are, where you've come from and whether you're a person or not," said Fester. "Fester, you're being so rude. To the one who saved our lives," Zeno reminded him. Vandali didn't understand why the 3 of them were so flustered, but for now, he decided to answer their questions. "I'm a damper, and I lived with my mother in a forest far away from people. I don't know where my father is or whether he's alive. My mother died of illness recently, so I'm heading to a town with an adventurers guild to fulfill her last wish of me becoming an adventurer. He had no intention of honestly telling them about his past, so he told them the lies that he had prepared in advance. Damn. It's true. His left and right eyes are different colors and he has claws. It's my first time seeing one. Hey. Do you have fangs as well? The three of them seemed to think that this explanation was enough to account for Vandali's strange features. The human rights of dampers were recognized in the Orborn kingdom, but it wasn't as if half-vampire children were born frequently, and even if the nation acknowledged Vandali as a person, whether the vampires would accept him was another matter entirely. Because of this, many people had never actually seen a damp. Even these three, who had attended the adventurers' school in the city, had only heard about dampers' racial characteristics like their odd-colored eyes, claws and fangs. Because of this, it seemed that they had brushed aside all of the other strange things about Vandali by telling themselves, it's because he's a damp. Could it be that dampers are considered rare in the Orborn kingdom? Vandali wondered. Yes, I do have fangs, but more importantly, are you fine with not cutting and taking the goblin's ears? He asked them. Oh yeah. The three of them exclaimed, suddenly returning to their senses. Kasim and Fester hurriedly began cutting the ears off the goblin soldiers to prove that they had killed them, while cutting open their chests to check if they had produced any magic stones. They even took the handles of the goblin soldiers' spears as well as the barbarians' club to use as fuel. Their greed was enough to surprise even Vandali, but this was normal for novice E-class adventurers. On first glance, the equipment that Kasim's party was using seemed to be equipment suited for adventurers who had been working for a long time, but they had simply been handed down to them by senior adventurers. In other words, they were second-hand goods. Kasim's shield was made of bronze, but his mace was made of stone and his armor was made of thick hide, called heavy leather armor. Zena's knife and Fester's sword were cheap products made by pouring metal into molds, and they were wearing cheap light leather armor. Their appearance was such that if they were dirty and had lost their registration cards, it wouldn't be surprising if they were mistaken for bandits. In contrast, Vandali had done his best to make his own appearance inconspicuous. He was wearing clothes that he had spent a lot of effort in making from the civilian clothing that he had stolen from the Mage Shield Nation's fort near the tunnel's exit last year. He was also carrying luggage that looked heavier than his own body weight. At first glance, the only thing that looked to be of value was the contents of his luggage. However, the only valuable item he had was the pair of sandals that he was wearing right now. They were an excellent product that Terra had created so that he could use his claws without discomfort. The soles had been made by sewing ogre and earth dragon hides together, and the laces had been made from rock dragon tendons. Selling these sandals would yield enough money to replace all of Kasim's party's equipment with brand new items. You can take the Goblin Barbarian's magic stone and proof of extermination. No, I'm not an adventurer yet, so please go ahead, said Vandali. No, we can't do that. Our rank 3 magic stone sells for 100 bombs, and the proof of extermination is worth 300 bombs. That thing is called a Goblin Barbarian. It was only now that Vandali realized that the goblin he had decapitated was not an ordinary goblin. But although the adventurers spoke to him about money, he had no idea whether it was a large amount or not. Well then, can you please lead me to a village or town? Vandali requested. Also, it would help if you could tell me about the places people are living and the Adventurers Guild. I'm a little ignorant about this world, you see. Kasim's party seemed to agree to this request. Alright. We'll lead you to the village we are using as our base. And so Vandali got a foothold for entering a place where people lived for the first time. Name, Kasim race, human age, 15 years old. Title, non-job, apprentice warrior level, 72. Job history, non-passive skills, none. Active skills, farming, level 1 club technique, level 1 shield technique, level 1 armor technique, level 1. Name, Xeno race, human age, 15 years old. Title, non-job, apprentice thief level, 65. Job history, non-passive skills, detect presence, level 1. Active skills, short sword technique, level 1 archery, level 2 trap, level 1. Name, Fester race, human age, 15 years old. Title, non-job, apprentice warrior level, 71. Job history, non-passive skills, enhanced muscular strength, level 1. Active skills, fishing, level 1 swordsmanship, level 2 dismantling, level 1. Chapter 69, Making a Decision with Someone's Life in the First Village. Following the lead of Kasim's party, Vandali was heading towards the village that they were working in, the 7th Cultivation Village. A cultivation village in a place like this? Vandali asked in surprise. There was a city's ruins to the south, and even a mine in beyond that. Fester was surprised himself at Vandali's question. I've never heard about the city, he said. If you go south from the village, there's only a rocky mountain with a slave-run mine in it. There is another duchy when you go past that, though. No, I've definitely heard that there was a city, 100 years or 200 years ago, said Kasim. Isn't that the city that Vandali is talking about? Ah, I see. He said he had a vampire parent, right? I suppose it wouldn't be strange for him to be told about that, said Fester. It seemed that the Hartner Duchy had gone into a decline in the past 200 years. But why on earth would such a thing happen? Vandali asked. The adventurers gave him puzzled looks in response to his question. Sorry, we're not really that well educated. Each of the duchies is its own state, like a country ruled by noblemen, so people like us don't really learn about the histories of other duchies, said Zeno. Are you all from other duchies? Vandali asked. Yeah, there's a long story behind that. It's a sad story to both hear and tell, Fester began. I'll tell him, Fester, said Zeno. First, regarding why the city disappeared, I'll tell you what we know. According to Zeno's explanation, the direct cause was Taylorsheim's ruin after all. That city had been built as a relay point for the commercial trade with Taylorsheim, and when that commercial trade disappeared, the productivity of the city decreased and it became difficult to maintain it. At the same time, the southern mines' production had fallen as well. Since profits couldn't be made by employing normal workers, slaves were used to carry out the mining. With the people working at the mine not even having money to spend, the Duke Hartner of the time, who had been newly appointed several years previously, had ordered that the city be dismantled. Vandali was amazed that they would have been willing to dismantle an entire city. It seemed that feudal societies did anything that had already been decided upon. In Japan, there would definitely be disputes over such an action. But what happened to the first princess? The name of Taylorsheim's first princess, Livia, didn't appear in Zeno's story. It might have been omitted because it didn't have anything to do with the city. It bothers me, but I suppose it would be unnatural for me to ask about it now. As Vandali thought this, Zeno's story skipped to more recent events. Actually, 5 years ago, the Amid Empire came attacking, he said. Most of the Sauron Duchy to the north was occupied. We're from the Sauron Duchy. We're what you call refugees, said Fester. Those guys from the Empire apparently behaved themselves in towns and larger farming villages, but in small villages like ours, they did whatever they liked. My oldest Anarchy tried to save his fiancée, and both of them, Fester, that's not the kind of story you should let such a small child hear, is it? The war between the Amid Empire and the Orborn Kingdom that Vandali had heard of previously. Vandali felt that he had suddenly caught up with what had been happening. Well, anyway, we're refugees who escaped the Sauron Duchy and came here to the Hartner Duchy, Zeno said in summary. When the initial conflict was over, the second son of the current Duke, Prince Belton, began a cultivation project to help the refugees. That's why we're able to live with our families in the 7th cultivation village that we are heading to now. But the village isn't exactly prospering, so we became adventurers on the 3rd year after it was built and went to the city, said Kasim. I see, said Vandali. I'm sure it must have been hard. Beginning a cultivation project to help the refugees seemed to be not a bad plan in Vandali's eyes. Unlike Earth, there was plenty of unoccupied land. The area around here in particular had no devil's nests, and even if monsters did appear, they were rank 2 at most. There was nothing but a slave-run mine at the end of the highway, so there were apparently almost no bandits as well. Vandali had wiped out a goblin pack led by a goblin king just yesterday, but something like that could probably be considered similar to a natural disaster. Kasim and his companions had been confused over the appearance of the goblin barbarian, which normally wouldn't appear on the highway. But there was no doubt that the goblin king had something to do with this. These goblins had likely been a scouting party who had been sent out hunting. I suppose so, said Kasim. The soldiers took us away, pointed at the open land and said, build a village here, so we made fields, dug wells, built houses. They protected the village from beasts and monsters until the village was finished, lent us tents and blankets, and although there wasn't much food and it wasn't very tasty, they did give us some, said Fester. We're also exempt from paying taxes for 5 years, but it was still hard. Hearing them talk, Vandali realized that they had gone through more hardships than he had imagined. Though land upon which a village could be built had been given to them, and they had been protected and given the necessities to live while building it, they had been made to build all of the houses, fields and infrastructure like wells by hand. Hey, it's still better than suffering and looking for work every day in the slums, isn't it? You're going to get punished if you complain too much, said Zeno. According to his words, the village's circumstances were still on the preferable side. And I'm sure this child has been through even harder things than us, Zeno continued. Sorry about these guys being so inconsiderate. Not at all, please don't worry about it, said Vandali. Thanks to my mother and other people, I didn't struggle to eat up until now. There was one time where he had struggled to eat so much that he had been forced to stave off his hunger by drinking earthworm soup, but that was rather difficult to tell them. After that, Vandali walked for 3 more hours while hearing about the adventurers' school and Duke Hartner before he arrived at the village. The 7th cultivation village had a population of around 300, a village size that would be considered between small and medium in Lambda. There were more human villagers than of any other race, as they made up about half of the village population. Among the other half, there were beast people, dwarves and titans. Elves, dark elves and draconids have long lifespans and unique cultures, so they often form groups within their own races. Because of this, while they might be found in cities, there are almost none in small villages. This applied even after becoming refugees, so the dark elves and draconids of the Sauron Duchy had apparently approached groups of members of their own races. And the titans in this village were those who had been living in the Sauron Duchy, so they had no relation to Taylorshire. The houses of the village were all one-story houses and they hadn't been built to be very sturdy, but considering that they had been hand-built by the villagers, they were very good. In fact, this was apparently the most populated of the 6 cultivation villages in this area. By the way, why are there only 6 cultivation villages if this is the 7th cultivation village? Asked Vandali. The first cultivation village couldn't make any profits and turned into a ghost town, Kasim explained. They did try pretty hard, too. The nearby spring dried up, and apparently water wouldn't come out even when they dug wells, said Zeno. Life in human society in this world was truly difficult. First, let's hurry and exchange these ears for money. With that, Kasim's party took Vandali to the village's only store, the general store/bar/adventurers guild branch that also acted as an inn for anyone who wanted to stay, commonly known as the Jack-of-all-trades store. It seemed that it was impossible to get by in this village without having multiple options for business. However, judging by the fact that none of the villagers had paid Vandali any attention so far, it was probably surprisingly common for people to come into the village from elsewhere. Vandali had found something that bothered him far more than the villagers' reactions, a small shrine containing a stone with Alder's holy symbol carved on it. He directed his attention towards it, but, Kasim, there's something behind you. The shopkeeper of the Jack-of-all-trades store referred to Vandali as something and pointed his finger at him. Hello. Trying not to be discouraged, Vandali greeted him. Hi. It talked. Someone call the priest Sama. Weren't these words too cruel, even for a secluded village in the countryside? Wait, Aji-san. This child isn't a ghost. His presence is lacking, but he's definitely alive. We can explain. Calm down and listen to us. Kasim's party hastily grabbed the shopkeeper and dragged him back into the store rather roughly, considering that they were trying to calm him down. The words of Kasim and his companions that made Vandali finally realize that his presence was as thin as air to those who weren't affected by his death attribute charm. It seemed that the reason the villagers hadn't said anything to Vandali was because they simply hadn't noticed him. Sorry about my father. He likes to say stupid things, said Lena, employee of this Adventurers Guild branch and daughter of the Jack-of-all-trades store's shopkeeper. She was a bright, simple, village girl-like guild employee. Not really. She was a village girl who had taken an examination to become an Adventurers Guild employee. Whether adventurers are present or not would greatly influence a small village's longevity, so it had been necessary to build somewhere for them to stay, even if it was a small lodging in the village's only store. Not at all. I'm used to it, said Vandali. This was a blatant lie. But even though the shock of being treated like this was still echoing inside Vandali, it wouldn't appear in his expression. Really? Then I suppose it's fine, but I'm really sorry about that, said Lena as she looked at Vandali's doll-like face. Although she was apologizing one more time, she let it go without noticing Vandali's feelings. Lena, more importantly, exchange these for money, said Festa. Yes. These are goblin soldiers and goblin barbarians? It's amazing that you managed to exterminate these, aren't you still E-class? Lena asked them, dumbfounded. No. The one who defeated them was, Festa began. Festa, we can talk about that afterwards, said Kasim. Just do the exchange first. Yes, you're right. Lena made the calculations rather slowly, and then she counted out the bronze and silver coins. It seemed that guild employees in village branches were more like part-time workers than proper Adventurers Guild employees, so they weren't expected to be particularly proficient. In fact, with Kasim's party being the only adventurers in the village, she only worked at the branch once every few days. But Vandali had noticed something else. I only just noticed this, but how is it that the Adventurers Guild distinguishes what kind of goblins have been killed using just their ears? The ears acted as proof of having exterminated goblins. Even Vandali could tell from their shape and color that they were goblin ears. But if he were to be asked what kind of goblins they were from, he would have no hope of answering. He would be able to understand for cases like goblin kings, who possessed such different constitutions from other goblins that it was difficult to believe that they were members of the same race. But goblin soldiers and goblin mages, who weren't very different in size or shape from regular goblins and simply had different equipment and ornaments, would be impossible to tell apart just by looking at their ears. So how could they be told apart? Was the incantation for appraisal recited for each one, or were skills like monster appraisal or extermination proof appraisal taught at the guild? The extermination proof of 14 goblin soldiers and a goblin barbarian comes to 400 bombs. The magic stones are 380 bombs, so the total is 780 bombs, said Lena. Just as Vandali was about to ask his questions about the goblin ears, the monetary exchange finished taking place. 780 bombs. If a single bomb was worth 100 yen, that would come to 78,000 yen. To Vandali, this amount of money didn't seem worth fighting and risking one's own life for. But he also knew that this was just how he felt as someone from Earth, from Japan. Divided between three of us, that's 260 each. Yes. Festa raised his fist into the air in triumph. With this, we can take it easy for a while, said Zeno, breathing a sigh of relief. Judging from their reactions, Vandali could tell that 260 bombs was sufficient pay for them. How much is that money worth? He asked. 260 bombs? Let's see, if you were working in the slums with one of the relatively better jobs, you might be able to earn 260 bombs after about 26 days, Zeno explained. It seemed that one would need to be fortunate enough to find daily work in the slums and work without rest for 26 days to earn 260 bombs. But there probably weren't welfare programs or safety nets like insurance for injuries and illness. And finding work every day wasn't guaranteed. Considering that, being able to earn this much in one day might be worth risking one's own life for. But even the fact that we have some leeway with this amount of money is all thanks to the fact that this Oyaji-san lets us stay here for free, Zeno continued. Indeed, we'd be in trouble if we didn't have adventurers, even if those adventurers do ogle my daughter, said the aforementioned Oyaji-san, joining in the conversation. Sorry about earlier, he said to Vandali. If you're staying here, I'll let you stay for free just like these guys, so forgive me, Oju-chan. He apologized with a gentle expression that made him look like a completely different person from before. That was fine, but, Oyaji-san. I don't really ogle Lena, Festa began. What, Festa? Are you saying that my daughter doesn't suit your tastes? The shopkeeper demanded. And who are you calling your Oyaji-san? Stop it, father. Said Lena. I'm a boy, said Vandali. Eh? For some reason, everyone present was surprised by this news. Vandali did indeed feel something of a culture shock from coming into contact with a society and culture other than his own. But the shock at the way the human society in Lambda treated me is something else entirely. Vandali couldn't have imagined that he had such a weak, ghost-like presence. And most importantly, this was the first time that he had realized that his appearance was such that he would be mistaken for a girl. There were times when his gender was mistaken by ghoul children as well, but he had thought that it was simply because ghoul men had lion heads. Vandali's other companions had never mistaken his gender before. The truth was that the ghouls and undead titans had only known because Vandali used /or as a pronoun for himself, and because Sam and his daughters referred to him as Bochan. It wasn't like they had thought that he was a boy from the very beginning. In a similar vein, others had also determined his gender by the fact that his pronoun for himself was Kama, or, because he was referred to as king, his unfeminine behavior and other things rather than the appearance of his face. Well, I'm still only 7 years old. I'm going to enter my second growth period. Once my voice changes, I grow some facial hair and gain some muscle, nobody is going to be able to make that mistake, Vandali told himself to recover from the shock. If one were to ask what Vandali was doing right now, the answer was that he was currently offering topics of conversation. So this child is a damp. It's my first time seeing one. Oh my, isn't she just like a doll? Are you eating properly? I touched the damp. I'm a lucky guy. Hey. You guys are being rude. He was being treated just like some kind of rare animal. It seemed that in this cultivation village that offered the inhabitants few ways of entertaining themselves, the damp that they had seen for the first time was something of a spectacle to behold. Because of this, the villagers came into the jack-of-all-trades store's dining area, one after another. It was far better than being treated as a ghost. Vandali himself didn't mind this treatment and responded politely when the villagers talked to him, so the villagers didn't hold back. I see, so you've had some rough times as well, haven't you? It's going to be hard, but you've got to do your best. The villagers generally treated Vandali favorably. Vandali figured that they could sympathize for his phase because as former refugees, they had suffered themselves, and they had the freedom to feel sympathy for others' pasts in this cultivation village. But there were two other reasons. The first was that the villagers had seen Vandali's expressionless, dead eyes and assumed that he had gone through incredibly hard times. The other was that Vandali was someone they could sympathize with at no cost to themselves. If Vandali were a mere powerless orphan, no matter how much sympathy the villagers had for him, the things they could do for him would be limited. Most of the villagers were young and were still capable of doing plenty of work in the future, but even so, they weren't prospering. For now, they were still exempt from paying taxes, but in 2 more years, this benefit would cease. The villagers wouldn't be able to take him in and raise him. But Vandali was someone who was hoping to be an adventurer, and if even half of the stories of Kasim and his companions were to be believed, he already possessed at least enough strength to exterminate goblins. With that being the case, sympathizing with him like this and treating him to a meal was plenty. Still, this was far better treatment than the complete disinterest that he would get in a city. I'm telling you, it's true. This guy came from behind and cut off the goblin barbarian's head in one hit. Fester exclaimed. It's not like I'm doubting you, said Lena, but it's just a little too unbelievable. No, you're doubting me, right? Believe me, Lena. Fester, we saw it with our own eyes and still can't believe it. So isn't it too much to ask for Lena to believe it? Zeno pointed out. They were talking behind Vandali, but considering that he could slay rank 3 monsters without any effort, it wasn't something worth convincing anyone of, so he stayed silent. In fact, he had rendered a rank 4 Goblin King completely helpless without any difficulty, only yesterday. Killing a Goblin Barbarian wasn't a significant achievement compared to that. Also, Vandali couldn't register at the branch that Lena managed on her own. Apparently, the only thing that could be done here was the exchange of extermination-proof parts and other materials. In order to register, Vandali would have to go to a proper guild branch in the city. Despite Balkas and the others having told him that 200 years ago, registration had been possible even at branches in small villages. It seemed that it wasn't only the Hartner Duchy that had gone through a decline in the past 200 years, the Adventurers Guild in the Orborm Kingdom seemed to have gone through a decline as well. This child is the damp child who saved Kasim and his friends? 2 men entered, asking this question. These 2 were the rare elderly members in this village of mostly young people. It looked like several years had passed since they were in the primes of their lives. The man at the front was wearing similar clothes to the other villagers, but the one following behind him was dressed in cotton clothes that had been properly colored using dyes, and there was a necklace with an ornament that Vandali hated, hanging from his neck. Chief, Priest Summer, has your discussion finished? Asked the storekeeper of the Jack-of-all-trades store. Yes, it is done, the village chief replied. More importantly, we must thank this child, he said as he took Vandali's hand and bowed. Thank you very much for saving Kasim and his friends. Even if you are someone aspiring to be an adventurer, I am sure it took great courage to attract the goblins' attention. It seemed that the story circulating among the villagers was, Vandali attracted the attention of the strong goblin while Kasim's party made a counter-attack to exterminate the goblins. Vandali was small compared to other children of his age, so for the villagers who didn't know much about dampers, this was probably far easier to believe than the truth of, Vandali cut the head of the goblin commanding the small unit from behind. I am glad to have been of help, replied Vandali, not particularly interested in correcting him. But you mustn't do such dangerous things, the chief told him. Adventurers must survive. Now that I think back, I think the people here are nicer than anyone on Earth. Vandali felt a little moved, thinking that humans aren't that bad. However, there was the priest Summer who was smiling behind this nice village chief, so he couldn't let his guard down. To think that I happened to be staying in this village to preach and met such a brave little girl. This must be Alda's guidance. The priest Summer, the priest of Alda, spoke in a gentle tone as he touched the cross-like holy symbol of Alda on his chest and offered a short prayer of thanks. Vandali's gender had been mistaken again, but he didn't care about that right now. Priest Summer, this child is ha ha ha, Chief San, there is nothing to worry about. Aldo only punishes the wicked. Those who perform just deeds will not be unjustly punished, even if they are dampers. I heard that you lived in a secluded forest or mountain. You have not yet been baptized, have you? Would you like me to carry out the ceremony? The priest offered. He wasn't releasing any intent to kill or making Vandali feel unpleasant, but the smile on his face looked shallow in Vandali's eyes. The constantly active danger sense, death gave no reaction, either. No thank you. Though it was an informal ceremony, my mother baptized me in Veda's name, Vandali replied. Even if it wasn't a trap, he didn't want to be baptized in Alda's name, so he told yet another lie. I see. What a good mother she was. With nothing more to ask regarding the baptism in Veda's name, the priest of Alda stepped back. The Orborn Kingdom was a collection of smaller countries that had united in order to protect themselves from the threat of the Amid Empire. With this being its origin, the religion of Alda, the god of law and fate, the primary religion of the empire, was not prohibited. The religion of Veda was allowed, but there were no restrictions placed on the religion of Alda, either. This is because there was a considerable number of people in the smaller nations who believed in Alda and his subordinate gods. But this religion couldn't be said to be exactly the same as the teachings of Alda in the empire. There were multiple groups of people who interpreted Alda's teachings in different ways. Among them was the harmonious faction who believed that virtuous individuals who uphold the law should be forgiven, even if they are members of Veda's races. This would be considered heresy by the clergymen of the Amid Empire, but it was this faction who had allowed dampers to be accepted as people in the Orborn Kingdom. This wasn't particularly strange or unnatural. Everyone in Lambda knew for certain that gods existed. But those gods had only existed in the world itself 100,000 years ago, during the Age of the Gods. Now, through divine messages and such, they could only convey their will with limited methods to a limited number of people. Because of this, each god's religion was interpreted in various ways depending on the nation, region and person, and these interpretations often had strange differences between them. The most prime example was the harmonious faction of Alda. But then, the reason the harmonious faction spread is because there were more members of Veda's races here than in the Amid Empire, including dukes who were beast men, and the people's impressions of Alda's religion in the Orborn Kingdom had worsened following the war, so this was probably a political decision made in order to survive. Even on Earth, it wasn't unusual for there to be multiple religions despite originating from the same god. I don't know what Alda is thinking, but there's no way that he would descend to the world, send divine messages or dispatch familiar spirits to all of his believers and point out which of their interpretations are wrong. Well, as long as it doesn't cause me harm, I don't really care. He didn't really like the condescending way he had been forgiven, but Vandali accepted that he couldn't afford to care about things like that if he wanted to survive in society. Priest Sama, about the medicine you gave me, it seems to be rather ineffective. That medicine is best taken in large doses, so please take it in double the dose that you have been doing up until now. Priest Sama, could you please have a look at our fields? I do not mind. Alda is also the god of life, after all. One by one, the villagers approached the priest with their troubles and requests. It seemed that the villagers adored him quite a lot, considering how shallow his smile was. The stories of saints and heroes told by clergymen were probably one of the few sources of entertainment in this cultivation village, and seeing that he was an educated man who could even mix medicine, it made sense that he was adored, even if he was a little suspicious. Suddenly, a voice came from outside. Priest Sama, please come. Ivan has fallen from a roof. It appeared that a villager had accidentally fallen from a roof while doing repairs. Judging from the tone of the voice, it seemed to be quite a serious injury. In fact, when Vandali used Detect Life, there was one person with an unnaturally weak reaction. That is not good. We must tend to him immediately, the priest said behind Vandali, standing up. Vandali quietly left the jack-of-all-trades store. Perhaps because their attention had been drawn to the priest, nobody noticed him leave. If he's not dead, I think I can do something about it. It's here. Using flight to rush to the place where the spell's reaction had come from, he saw a man in his 30s lying limp on the ground and a woman with a large abdomen, a little younger than the man. There was also a child, smaller than Vandali. Honey. Hold on, the priest is coming now. Daddy. Daddy. Though his wife and son were clinging onto him, the man let out nothing but a groan in reply. His breathing looked labored. There was a thick shadow of death on his face. This is a serious injury. It's not his bones, it's his organs in the worst-case scenario. Something might have even happened to his brain. In such a situation, with Lambda's medical treatment, it was hopeless. Magic might be able to do something about it, but this was the edge of the village. Vandali judged that he would likely die before the priest arrived, though that priest would likely be able to do anything other than shake his head unless he was a first-rate practitioner. Of course, If Vandali used death attribute magic, there was a high chance that he could save the life of this man named Ivan. The wife wouldn't have to lose her husband, nor would the child in her abdomen and the child by the man's side have to lose their father. However, Vandali's current objective was to register at the guild without attracting any attention, and then dash back to Talersheim. A child saving a life that could not be saved without high-level magic. That would attract plenty of attention. To follow my original plan, or give in to my emotions, it can't be helped. I give up. Excuse me. With these words, a child quickly approached Ivan's side and touched his body. Here? You are. Who are you? The woman and child who hadn't noticed Vandali's presence were surprised, so Vandali said, I'm the damp that people are talking about in this village. My name is Vandali, to introduce himself as he cast spirit form transformation. In a way that they couldn't see, he produced tentacles from the palms of his hands that were touching Ivan, fusing with Ivan and extending his spirit form into his body. It was indeed the brain that was the problem. There was intracranial bleeding, and the blood that was pooling inside his head was creating pressure on his brain. Absorb the accumulated blood with my tentacles. Regenerate the broken blood vessels with healing power enhancement. After that, repair the cracks in his skull. This person has an aneurysm in the blood vessel near his heart. I suppose I'll fix that while I'm at it. Ah, there's a growth in his large intestine. It seems malignant, so I'll remove that. His athlete's foot I might as well cure it as well. Hey, what are you, Mommy? Daddy's face is looking better. You're right. Could it be that you're healing him? Ah, yes. Please wait a little longer, said Vandali. The man called Ivan had been in poor health. The image of a simple, slow life being a healthy one wasn't true, at least in his case. Vandali had done all of the medical treatment he could, so he returned the tentacles back to his body and undid his spirit form transformation. Things will be alright now. He'll likely open his eyes soon, said Vandali. Vandali had even fused his own stamina and nourishment with Ivan's and expended it in order to heal him, so there was no way that he would stay unconscious. Vandali had taken up the blood that had accumulated in Ivan's skull, but he would consider that as the treatment fee. Ugh, what happened to me? Ivan opened his eyes in the next moment. Honey. Daddy. The woman and child embraced Ivan. It was a moving sight. This was what a household, a family, should be like. What is the meaning of this? Why are you here? Ivan asked his family. Ivan? Said a man's voice. Just a moment ago, you were lying on the ground, looking like you were going to die. How are you looking so lively now? Just as Vandali began feeling respect for Ivan for having built such a good household, the priest, village chief and the others had finally arrived. Now if they could be fooled into thinking that Ivan's condition had actually been nothing serious and that the man who had called for the priest had jumped to the wrong conclusion, everything other than Vandali being present could be resolved. This child called Vandali, healed him. This child saved his life. Ivan's wife exclaimed. Madam, honest women are well liked. Now that you mention it, I had a dream. A scary god of death had grabbed my head, but before I knew it, there was a goddess patting my head instead. I see, so that must have been this child, Ivan concluded. Who are you calling a goddess? And so, Vandali saved the life of a villager he had never met before, attracting a lot of attention to himself. Chapter 70, The Peculiar, Sharp-Tongued, Flying Beast, 7 years old. As a result of saving Ivan's life, having given up on not attracting attention, Vandali was warmly welcomed back at the village's only store, the Jack-of-all-trades store. You saved my life, kid, said Ivan. A little longer and I would have died a stupid death and not been able to show my second child my face. Now then, go ahead and eat, it's my treat. Don't go acting so high and mighty like treating him a meal is a big deal, said his wife. Not at all. I was just starting to feel hungry, Vandali told them as he ate. He was eating rice porridge. It was something that had been made with long-grained rice similar to the indica rice of Earth, edible plants, possibly for removing the peculiar smell of the rice, beans to increase the volume of the meal, and a little salt. It really wasn't a big deal. The taste came from the ingredients. In fact, there was no taste other than the taste of the ingredients. However, it was currently summer, the time of year just before rice would be harvested. That was probably why they could only offer this much. This 7th cultivation village was blessed for even being able to make rice porridge. If I add the dried meat and dried fish in my luggage to this porridge, it would probably increase the salty flavor and taste quite good, Vandali thought, but he continued eating the rice porridge without putting this idea into practice. The concept of smoked food apparently didn't exist in this world, so smoked dried meat and dried fish would become products of Talersheim in the future. Thus, he had to keep them secret. Incidentally, the jack-of-all-trades store's bar space had no menu. The alcohol was unrefined sake that the shopkeeper had made himself, using millet as a base, while drinking snacks were roasted or cooked beans and, occasionally, vegetables. And the only meals available were what the storekeeper's family was eating. This was only natural, as the family made their food in large quantities and served it to their patrons. Vandali had wondered whether this really worked for business, but looking at it another way, the business wouldn't work in this village unless done this way. Each household was capable of making its own sake, and their ability to cook wasn't any different from the couple who ran the jack-of-all-trades store. Thus, the only guests who would pay money to eat and drink here were the soldiers, merchants and their escorts who passed through here as they took the highway to the slave-run mine, as well as Kasim's party. If they set up a system to be able to cook multiple different dishes, their costs would actually increase. As a result, Vandali was eating this rice porridge. "It's not very tasty, is it?" said the shopkeeper in a serious tone, seemingly aware of this. "That's not true," said Vandali. "Nah, it's fine. Since you saved Ivan's life, I'd like to give you something that tastes better to eat, but this is the best I can do with the rice we grow here." "Oi, Archie-san, we agreed not to say that, didn't we? Still, it's true that the rice we grew in the Sauron Duchy tasted better. It didn't have the smell." Apparently, they had grown a type of rice similar to japonica rice in the Sauron Duchy north of the Hartner Duchy, commonly known as Sauron rice. But climate and soil of the land of the Hartner Duchy that they had fled to wasn't suited to growing Sauron rice. With no other choice, they began growing the rice commonly cultivated in the Hartner Duchy, the indica rice known as southern rice in the Orborn Kingdom. In other words, it's all the Empire's fault. Vandali came to the conclusion that it was the Empire's fault that he couldn't eat rice similar to the japonica rice that he was used to today. Yeah, it's all the Goddamn Empire's fault. That's right, that's right. Everything was caused by the Empire. Since this was a cultivation village full of refugees who had been chased from their homelands by the Empire, they were unanimous in their agreement with Vandali's words. Still, to think that you can use magic. It really surprised me. "I thought you'd be a warrior or an armed fighter for sure," said Kasim. He and his friends were eating the same rice porridge as Vandali. The priest of Alder nodded. "Yes, I was quite surprised to learn that you are so loved by Vida. The fact that you have appeared on this day on which Kasim's party and Ivan's lives were in danger is surely the will of the gods. Though we offer prayers to Alder and Vida, the gods who parted ways in the myths, let us take each other's hands and strive to do good deeds," he said, smiling at Vandali while placing his hand on his chest. His smile still appeared shallow to Vandali, but his words seemed honest. At the very least, he was much more like a clergyman than High Priest Gordon had been. It was possible that he was an unexpectedly virtuous person. "It makes me happy to hear you say that," said Vandali. "I'm not party of any ministry, though. Come to think of it, what's the Church of Vida in the Hartner Duchy like? I'll visit it once I get to the city. By the way, how is it that you are speaking so clearly while eating rice porridge?" the priest asked. "It's a special skill," Vandali replied. Vandali had used out-of-body experience to create a spirit form face beneath his clothes, and he had been using its mouth to speak this whole time. "Ah, another helping, please," he requested. "You're still eating more? I mean, it's fine, but that's already your third bowl," said the shopkeeper. "I was quite hungry. I'm sorry." Vandali was smaller and thinner than other children his age, but he ate an amount that was impossible to imagine considering his size. This was because the amount of energy he required was already more than double that of the average adult man. "First your strength and magic, and now even your appetite is like an adventurer's," Kasim remarked. Thin people with large appetites weren't rare among adventurers, as they had combat-related jobs and greater physical abilities than those with creation-related jobs. Kasim and his friends, who had attended the adventurer's school, weren't as surprised as the shopkeeper. "Chief!" shouted a man, rushing into the jack-of-all-trades store. "Kine from the nearby 5th cultivation village is here, looking for the priest Sama, Iwa." He was suddenly thrust aside by another man who had also rushed inside, covered in scratches. "Priest Sama!" shouted the second man. He had certainly fallen over numerous times on his way here. "Come to our village. There's a disease, an epidemic at our village, and everyone is collapsing. Please, come quickly." "An epidemic?" the shopkeeper repeated. "How could that be?" "But the sun has already set," said the priest. Heading for the 5th cultivation village from now would be the road directly connected the 7th cultivation village, and the 5th cultivation village was essentially an animal trail. It would take 4 hours on foot to travel this animal trail. And night was when wolves and monsters would be active. It didn't need to be said just how dangerous an unmaintained animal trail would be. It was possible to go to the highway to travel to the 5th cultivation village, but that would take an entire day. Kine, let us leave first thing in the morning. Please rest your body until then, said the priest. How can you say that? Said Kine in protest. Then everyone in the village, my wife, my daughter. Please understand, Kine. We cannot travel a dangerous road at night. The goblins have increased in numbers as of late, and if we are defeated before we reach the village, then it will be meaningless. How Kine's shoulders fell as he began sobbing. There were some who raised their hands, moved by the ordinary man who had braved the dangers in order to come here for the sake of his friends in his village, his wife and his daughter. All right, we'll be your escorts. Well then, I'll take this Kine-san and fly there, said Vandali. There were people willing to help, but that didn't mean that all of them could go together. The stars are beautiful, aren't they? Hi. The moon looks amazing tonight. No. The only ones capable of flying in the world of Lamdu are a small portion of mages, wealthy people with expensive magic items, those who have tamed monsters capable of flying such as dragon knights, and members of Veda's races who have wings. Thus, to the average person, the idea of flying through the sky is nothing more than a dream or delusional thought. Kine was undergoing this precious experience. Vandali was using flight to head towards the 5th cultivation village, holding his luggage in his hands while carrying Kine on his back with a safety rope securely tied between them. But Kine was clinging to Vandali desperately and screaming in fear of falling, so it seemed that he didn't have the time to enjoy this precious experience. By the way, it's fine if I just go straight, isn't it? Asked Vandali. Yeah? There's a small swamp along the way, I think you can use that as a landmark. Kine shouted back. We passed the swamp a little while earlier, so I think it should be fine if we keep going this way. Vandali and Kine were flying about 30 meters above the ground. Their speed was about that of a running horse at most, but it seemed that Kine was too terrified to even open his eyes. But then, since Kine didn't have the dark vision skill, his eyes wouldn't have been able to see anything even if they were open. We've already passed the swamp? Kine asked. Yes. By the way, you're kind of strangling me, Vandali told him. The speed of Vandali's flight was fast compared to a person running, but the fact that he could ignore terrain and fly in a straight line towards his destination was a big reason for the amount of distance that they had traveled. They would probably reach the village within the next 10 minutes. He was expending a large amount of mana to fly like this, however. Thanks to my automatic mana recovery skill, my mana expenditure and its recovery cancel each other out if it's just me and my luggage, but with Kine-san's body weight I guess I still need more training. No, more importantly, let's ask him about the disease. So, about the epidemic, can you tell me what kind of disease it is one more time? Vandali asked. Vandali was curious about the epidemic that Kine had spoken of. He had already heard the simple details, but he had thought that there was something very abnormal about it. I mean, I came back from hunting and saw that everyone had collapsed, Kine explained. They had fevers and nausea, they were struggling to stay conscious and there were some guys coughing blood. Are there any healthy people other than you, Kine-san? Vandali asked. Other than me if I'm not mistaken, Joseph Jason still looked alright. Also, the babies haven't become sick yet. Who is this Joseph-san? He's an old lumberjack. He's had a terrible cold since yesterday, and he was apparently lying in bed until I got back. Right now, he's pushing himself to nurse everyone else in the village. That person isn't sick with the epidemic? Probably not. He has a fever and running nose, but it wasn't nausea and he wasn't coughing blood. That's why I asked him to look after the others. Even if he can move, I couldn't ask an old man to run to the next village, and the babies can't be left alone for half a day, even if they're not sick. In other words, excluding Kine-san who had left to go hunting and wasn't in the village, everyone that collapsed in illness, showing the same symptoms, other than the old man who had been sleeping and the babies. And Kine-san is healthy. From the moment Kine had barged into the Jack-of-all-trades store, Vandali hadn't seen the shadow of death in him. It was difficult to imagine that he was infected with a dangerous epidemic. Just in case, Vandali had used spirit form surreptitiously to examine Kine's body while he was clinging to Vandali in panic, but he was healthy. It seemed that he would live far longer than Ivan. After hearing the word epidemic, Vandali had used sterilization to kill all of the harmful bacterial and viruses in the 7th cultivation village before leaving just in case, but wasn't this a case of poisoning rather than disease? But this would explain things if only 1 or 2 people had fallen ill. What methods could have been used to poison the entire village? And what was the motive to do so in the first place? Was anything different today? Asked Vandali. No, today was normal, replied Kine. The only thing was that today was the day that the traveling merchant came. Traveling merchant? Vandali repeated. Yeah, he's a respectable fellow whose store shut down, and now he's doing his best to make his way back up as a traveling merchant, said Kine. Either way, it's helpful that he comes to a small village like ours that's far from the highway, but come to think of it, he wasn't at the village. I hope he hasn't collapsed after he left. That person is probably the culprit. Well, the motive is still unclear, though. But saving people came before solving mysteries. Could that be the village? Vandali, who possessed the dark vision skill that let him see through the night's darkness like it was the middle of the day, saw a number of wooden houses that had been built on open land. It probably is, said Kine. Please, the sick people are. Well then, I'll cure them all at once from here, said Vandali. The village is from here to there. Well, I guess it'll be fine if I use 3,000 or so. Detoxification, disinfect. What appeared to be waves of black mist spread across the village. Honey, you were alive. Daddy. I'm so glad. You're cured. I'm so glad. The sight before Vandali gave him a small sense of déjà vu, but this happy, emotionally moving scene between Kine and his family was happening all over the village. The villagers' pain, fevers and nausea that had come without warning vanished completely, and their hazy minds became clear. At the same time, Kine's family had been cured of the disease as well. As they celebrated, they heard voices outside. People came to find Kine, illuminated by a blue-white flame. At first, the villagers had thought that Kine's ghost had created a miracle for them, but once this misunderstanding was cleared up, things turned into a whirlpool of emotions. Phew, what a relief, said Vandali. Using flight while holding, or being held by, an adult man had consumed a large amount of mana. It was an inefficient spell to begin with, so it couldn't be helped. He had spent 70 million mana. And since it was late in the night, he was sleepy. As a healthy child, he wanted to go to sleep soon, but would he have to return to the 7th cultivation village first? For now, Vandali decided to make lemures and have them search for the culprit, the traveling merchant, who had disappeared. He wasn't familiar with the geography of this area, so there was a high chance that he wouldn't be able to find the culprit if the culprit had taken a side road away from the highway, though. Vandali was under the assumption that the traveling merchant was the culprit, but as the villagers had been recovered after the use of detoxification, it was certain that their illness hadn't been caused by a disease. And since the traveling merchant himself wasn't here, the circumstantial evidence was perfect. Everyone. The poison has disappeared, but your strength hasn't recovered, so don't get too excited. Please get some rest. Honey, who is this child? Kine's wife asked. This child cured the disease for you guys, he's the one who saved the village. Thank you, thank you. Kine held Vandali in the air, his face drenched with tears and mucus. Vandali had carelessly let the word poison slip, but it seemed that nobody had noticed it. What did you say? Oh, this is the savior of the village. It's a familiar spirit Sama. That should be Vida, said Vandali. It's a familiar spirit Sama. That should be Vida, said Vandali. The villager was about to say something extremely uncomfortable, so he had to at least firmly deny this one thing. Vida, the goddess Vida's familiar spirit. No, you should be resting instead of doing this. Vandali returned to his senses, but the villagers were all over him. Don't blame me if I can't move my body tomorrow. I suppose I'll be staying here tonight, he whispered to himself. The lemur's search failed and the traveling merchant got away. If there had been casualties, Vandali might have been able to find him. But because of Kine's efforts and Vandali's treatment, none of the villagers had died, so he had no clues. According to the villagers, the traveling merchant apparently followed a religion of a god that they had never heard of before, that they weren't even sure existed, and it was a national holiday for followers of that religion. He had treated everyone by giving them tea that he had prepared himself and confectionery. The confectionery that Kine's wife and child had saved for him for when he got back from hunting had contained poison. This was certainly the source of the illness. It seemed that the traveling merchant had told them that the confectionery would go bad quickly and should be immediately eaten by those already present, but now, evidence had been left behind. Well, Vandali had erased the poison with his spell, so he wasn't sure if it would be accepted as evidence. It was difficult to imagine that there would be anyone who could detect the traces of the poison that Vandali had erased with death attribute magic. It was difficult to imagine that a traveling merchant who would do something like this would be formally registered at the Commerce Guild, too. Well, there was a chance that he had assumed that all of the villagers were dead and was now foolishly heading to the nearest town. After comforting the villagers who were shocked to learn that they had been betrayed by the traveling merchant they had trusted, Vandali had stayed the night and left lemures behind to keep watch. And as for what he was doing now, he was flying through the sky while singing in a flat pitch. He was going around to see if yesterday's traveling merchant was trying to do something in the other cultivation villages. Of course, he could have ignored the merchant and prioritized his goal of registering at the Adventurers Guild, but if there were other villages where people had been poisoned like the 5th cultivation village and all of the villagers were on the verge of death, he would have an uneasy conscience. They do say that even chance meetings are due to fate, and that good you do to others is good that you do to yourself. Vandali felt uncomfortable receiving money as a reward, so he had decided to have the villagers create a shrine for Vida in the village. Though it was a shrine, like the shrine for Alda, it was just a large stone with a holy symbol, a heart, in Vida's case, carved on it and a simple roof built over it. But because it was so simple, it was something that Vandali could easily ask for. He was being treated more and more like an incarnation of Vida's familiar spirit as a result, but he didn't really mind. How to go? Vandali was currently on the way to the 6th cultivation village when he noticed that there were several dozen silhouettes on the ground. When he looked closely, he saw a group of men wearing worn-out leather armor with a grimy air about them, proceeding along the animal trail that led to the 6th cultivation village. He took out and checked the map that Kine had drawn for him on some tree bark. There was no mistake. He called the spirits that were floating around behind them and listened to them. These men were apparently bandits. He asked numerous spirits the same question and they all gave him the same answer. It seemed that these men really were bandits. It was time to get rid of them. "Listen up, you bastards," said the man who appeared to be the leader of the bandits. "Once we get to the village, kill all the men, and once you have your fun with them women, kill them as well. But the good-looking ones who look like they can sell, don't you put one scratch on them. You good with that?" "No, I'm not." "What? You bastard, you're going against. Who is this brat?" The bandit leader turned around to see Vandali there, floating silently in the air. "Boss, this thing is a monster. Suddenly coming down from above, it's definitely a ghost or something." "No," said Vandali in response to the frightened bandits. "I'm just a flying 7-year-old child who happened to be passing by. In this world, normal 7-year-old children do not fly. Tch, he's underestimating us. Kine, use your superhuman strength to dispose of this thing," the leader ordered. A skinhead with the best physique among the bandits stepped forward with a smile on his face. "Boss, can I play with it a little before I kill it?" he asked. "Still into kids, do what you want," said the leader. "Hi, I've got permission." Kine screamed in delight, his eyes gleaming in anticipation as he swung his warhammer in an intimidating manner. "Boss, aren't we supposed to be attacking the village?" another bandit asked. "It's not a problem," replied the leader. "Kine's definitely gonna break that kid quickly. I suppose you're right. Oi, kid, if you stay still, I'll just smash your arms and legs and then play around with you a little," said Kine. "But if you resist, I'll smash your arms and legs and then turn you into my toy." "Wow, it's an idiot," Vandali said in exasperation. "What?" screamed Kine. "Being called an idiot is the thing I hate the most. Don't you know that? There's no way I could know that, is there? Damn it. You're making me out to be an idiot." Turning red with anger, now resembling a boiled octopus, the bandit Kine thrust his warhammer towards Vandali. "One swing from this warhammer is enough to deal with kids like you. I mean, if you were facing anyone who could withstand more than one blow, you wouldn't be able to do anything, would you? From the looks of it, you're just relying on pure strength as you swing it. Your movements are those of a person who doesn't have the club technique skill." Instead of voicing all of these retorts, Vandali stuck out his tongue. "This tongue is enough to deal with small fry like you. Before Kine could finish screaming his words, Vandali's cheeks puffed out. Now that he did this, he could be considered quite cute despite his expressionless face. But his cheeks returned to normal as he blew something out of his mouth with a small spitting sound. Kine stiffened and then toppled backwards like a rotten tree. His left eyeball had turned into a red puddle of blood, no longer a bloodshot eye with a pupil. "Eh? Kine? What's wrong?" As the bandits stood there dumbfounded, a soft, red, snake-like thing emerged from Kine's left eye. "Hi." Right before the terrified bandit's eyes, the red snake slithered out of Kine's eye socket with blood dripping from it, and then rose into the air, straight into Vandali's mouth. "This is an original martial skill, Sharp Tongue," said Vandali. "It seems to be quite powerful if I fire it while secreting deadly poison. I suppose its flaw is that if I don't retract my tongue or grow another one, I can't talk." It was a martial skill of the unarmed fighting technique skill where he used the effects of venom secretion, claws, fangs, tongue, skill, spirit form transformation on the root of his tongue to separate his tongue from his body, and the long-distance control skill to fire it as a projectile. Of course, the only person capable of coming up with and using such a martial skill was Vandali. Well, I suppose I can use it if I keep it as my last resort? He said to himself. What the hell are you? Now that the only kind left is the kind that's a good-willed hunter, I'll dispose of the rest normally, Vandali decided. Run. This kid is really a mons. What there? My legs won't move. My legs are shaking too. Why won't they move? Vandali glided towards the bandits as they struggled desperately. The claws at the tips of his small fingertips were more than enough to slit their throats. I just spread some poison, Vandali told them. Didn't you notice that I'd called out to you from upwind? Now then, you'll answer my questions, won't you? Though I'll ask you one more time after killing you anyway. Chapter 71, If there's nothing to eat, you can eat goblins, can't you? I don't know, I really don't know, the bandit leader whispered with the eyes of a dead fish, saliva dripping from the corner of his mouth. Vandali gave a small groan. You really don't know? Considering that, your timing is quite strange, isn't it? The day after the traveling merchant's attempt to poison the villagers, bandits had tried to attack another cultivation village. It was too strange to be a coincidence. But none of the bandit leader's subordinates had any information that could be clues, either. The bandits had apparently been moving territories, bought the locations of the cultivation villages for cheap from the information broker in the closest town to this place, a town called Niyaki. They had learned that the villages were easy to attack as there were no adventurers in any of the villages other than the 7th cultivation village, so they had come out here. The information broker that had information on the internal affairs of the cultivation villages that only a small portion of people ever traveled to, such as the traveling merchant in question, seemed suspicious. But nobody had known the bandits' names, and their faces had been concealed by cloths below the eyes. With this, there would be no way to chase the bandits. I suppose I'll try pouring a little more, just in case, said Vandali. Stop please. If you've ever stopped killing, raping and selling innocent people, I'll take that into consideration. So, have you ever quit? Vandali asked. No, that's what I thought. Vandali placed his claws, which had a liquid dripping from their tips, into the gaping mouth of the bandit leader. The fluid being secreted by the claws dripped out. That fluid was what is commonly referred to as truth serum, secreted through the venom secretion, claws, fangs, tongue, skill. The venom secretion, claws, fangs, tongue, skill that he had acquired with the Venom Fist user job was a skill that allowed venom secretion, just as its name suggested, but unlike the ghoul's skill, the poison he could secrete wasn't limited to paralyzing venom. Before acquiring the Venom Fist user job, Vandali had the idea that he might be able to handle poisons and drugs better, so he tested this idea after acquiring the job. He found that toxicity of the venom he created was weaker than the poison he created using death attribute magic, but he gained the ability to secrete toxic drugs with various effects from his claws, fangs and tongue. And so Vandali had become a living pharmacy who could create truth serum, antiseptic solution, anesthesia, digestive medicine, sunscreen, eye drops and even vitamin pills. But it did have the flaw of using the nutrients in Vandali's body rather than mana, so he couldn't use it consecutively like magic. One more time, Vandali asked the bandit leader the questions he had already asked, but before he could answer, the bandit leader began convulsing and then died. So, what's the answer to the question I just asked? Vandali asked the bandit leader's spirit, as if nothing had happened. I don't know, I really don't know. Not discouraged by the fact that the answer hadn't changed, Vandali grabbed the corpse of the recently deceased bandit leader's corpse and bit into its neck. And then he used blood sucking. He was also sucking up the truth serum components remaining in the bandit leader's body, but with his status effect resistance skill, these would have no effects on him at all. Phew, I've been hungry for animal protein since yesterday, so that was perfect. Now then. He quickly searched the bandits' pockets, took their money and collected their weapons while he was at it. He then threw their corpses into a hole he had created with golem transmutation and used decomposition to make their bodies decay into bleached skeletons before burying them. All done. Vandali used flight once more to head towards the 6th cultivation village. There didn't seem to be anything unusual happening at the village. The villagers gathered in surprise to the white-haired damp that had descended from the sky. Vandali heard what they had to say and decided to perform some medical treatment on some of them before heading towards the next village. Please wait, familiar spirit Sama. I cannot let you go without thanking you for healing my father's eye. No, it wasn't a big deal, you know. Vandali told the villager. All he had done was perform a simple surgery with spirit form transformation, secrete eye drops and create a small bottle to contain them with golem transmutation. Thank you for healing my son's burns. Thanks to you, my son's fingers, his fingers. All he had done was perform a simple surgery with spirit form transmutation and fuse with him to heal the burned fingers back to normal with rapid healing. Well, in this village without a doctor, village without a healing mage, it was probably a big deal. But Vandali still felt awkward about receiving payment. This cultivation village seemed poorer than the 7th cultivation village and even poorer than the 5th cultivation village. Well then, please build a shrine to Vida when you're not busy with work. Carving a stone with her holy symbol and building a simple roof over it is enough, Vandali told the villagers. And then he headed for the next cultivation village. The level of the surgery skill has increased. Though the next village was poor, it was a good village where the villagers spent every day working as hard as they could. Bujiajiajiu. Bufuyuyu. Bugigigigijih. Or at least, it had been until 3 orcs broke down the crude wooden walls surrounding the village and made their way inside. Run, it's orcs. Hi. The villagers ran for their lives. Orcs, a familiar enemy for adventurers, were great threats for poor villagers who were former refugees. If it was only one orc, perhaps the hunters and villagers' young men would be able to surround it and somehow chase it away, but with 3 of them together, there was nothing to be done. If all of the men in the village attacked them together, it might be possible for them to send them back, but including the farmlands, the village was quite large. It was impossible to swiftly gather all of the men from all over the village, arm them with farming tools for weapons and have them attack these orcs who had appeared without warning. The orcs casually lumbered through the village, looking around at the fleeing villagers as if evaluating them. Kai-ah. Right in front of them, a young girl fell down. It seemed that it would take her another year or 2 to reach adulthood, but she was plenty old enough to satisfy the orcs' twisted lust. Bufafew. The 3 orcs all scrambled towards her. Beth. I'm coming. A beast person boy of the same age as the girl, with the ears and tail of a wolf, ran towards her with a hoe in his hands. Morris. It's too late, you can't help me. You have to run. The girl shouted. No way. I'm not going to hand you over to those orcs, Beth. The boy had broken free of the grip of the male wolf beast person who appeared to be his father in order to run to his childhood friend, who was probably the girl that he loved. Morris, you can't come here. Beth was also trying to stop him. She knew that he wouldn't be able to defeat orcs. Of course, Morris knew this as well. If a child like him could defeat orcs with a hoe, adventurers wouldn't have trouble against them. He would certainly be beaten to death by the orcs' clubs, only delaying Beth's violation by a few seconds. But even so, Morris couldn't stop himself from taking these actions. You guys, your opponent is me. Seeing a boy raising a hoe to face them, the orcs welcomed him with a derisive laugh. Right next to the female was a young male who looked like he had tender meat. Paho. An orcs raised its club, looking to quickly kill the boy and turn him into meat. Morris's hoe was repelled by the surface of the orc's body, failing to pierce its thick fat and the muscle beneath it. Despair appeared on Morris's face. Suddenly, blood sprayed through the air. Thinking that this was Morris's blood, Beth shut her eyes. Morris himself thought that he had died. That's one. Next, Heavy Fist. But the villagers saw what had happened. A white child had descended from the sky at an incredible speed and burst the orc's head with a single attack. Bugih. An unarmed fighting technique martial skill that was easy to avoid, yet had the power to make up for this weakness, struck the second orc's head and killed it. Bgo. The third orc regained its senses and raised its club, but in the eyes of Vandali, who had completed training with Braga and the other black goblins, this movement was far too slow. Vandali's claws pierced the orc cleanly, administering more than a lethal dose of neurotoxin. The orc convulsed several times before collapsing as its knees gave out. Huh? And then Vandali turned around to speak to the boy who was staring at him blankly. That was questionably reckless, but people can be taken over by their emotions, so I can understand your actions. I have memories of doing such things, too. What I'm trying to say is, I'm glad I could save you. Yeah, thanks. Morris instinctively thanked the blood-soaked, smoothly speaking boy floating in the air with his arm bent at an odd angle. So, please don't be scared of me. Vandali still had no confidence in his luck with interacting with people. He was anxious that even though he had saved people who were being attacked, they would scream and think he was just another monster. Your arm. As Morris pointed out Vandali's arm, which had broken after being unable to endure speed of his descent and the attacks that he had beaten the orcs to death with, Vandali used his other arm to casually straighten it and used spirit form transformation on the parts that were concealed beneath his clothes. He rearranged his bones and blood vessels into their correct positions so that they would heal quickly. "It's fixed," said Vandali. "Aye, it is?" said Beth. Her eyes were opened wide in surprise as well. "More importantly, won't you take the orcs apart? With 3 of them, all of the villagers would be able to eat until they're full." Vandali's words caused both Beth and Morris to regain their senses completely. Though Morris and Beth being nearby was one reason, Vandali had avoided using magic in order to kill the orcs in a way that their meat could be used afterwards. It would have been a waste if they couldn't be eaten. When Vandali asked the orcs' spirits why they had attacked the village, they replied that their boss had told them to go on a rampage and do what they wanted in this village. "So, what happened to that boss?" Vandali asked. "He sent us here and then went somewhere." "The boss is an orc?" "No, a human." "Do you know his name and what his face looks like?" "He called himself, Boss." "His face, his nose looked like a human's. His ears weren't pointed. He was blacker than you. He didn't have horns or wings." Turning into spirits hadn't made the orcs any smarter, so this was all they knew. From this information, Vandali figured that it was probably a human tamer who had sent these 3 orcs to this cultivation village for some reason. He sent lemurs to look for signs of any suspicious people in the vicinity, but they didn't find anything. "Isn't there some place that sells information about the train?" Vandali wondered as he dismantled an orc's body with his claws. Vandali didn't have the dismantling skill, a skill that most adventurers who worked alone would possess. However, he had the cooking and surgery skills instead, so he could accomplish more or less the same thing as with the dismantling skill. Finishing the dismantling of his orc faster than any of the villagers, he decided to start cooking with the organs that would rot the fastest. But apparently water had been in rather short supply of late, so the villagers had told him that he couldn't use large amounts of water to cook. That would make preparation of the organs impossible. But he didn't want to see the villagers seeing him use death attribute magic or the golem transmutation skill. That was why Vandali went to the back of the house, away from the eyes of the villagers, and used golem transmutation to dig a well. He searched the ground with out-of-body experience and found a cave with a source of underground water at a depth that would be difficult to dig by hand. He made earth golems and rock golems using the earth between the ground surface and the underground water and made the golems move into the cave to get to the water. And once Vandali had solidified the inner surface of the hole with rock golems, the well was complete. Of course, he hadn't checked whether the underground water was suitable to drink yet. There's a well in a place like this. Acting like a child playing detective, Vandali led the villagers to the well. "That's impossible, there's no way there would be a well. It's a well." "There's a well? What? How could this? What about the water? How's the water?" The villagers rushed in. Vandali took the water he had already drawn and returned to cooking. And then he carefully prepared the organs. "No matter how much I use sterilization and disinfect, it's not like the contents of the organs physically disappear. People wouldn't want to eat the organs of an orc, even if they were harmless to the body." The same applied for Vandali. "Thank you very much, familiar spirit Sama. Not only have you saved my sons, but you have given us such an abundant well. How could we ever thank you for this? Thanks to you, this village can prosper for many years, many decades to come. Thank you, thank you." Incidentally, as to be expected, the villagers had realized that the well had been created by Vandali. But then, Vandali hadn't expected that he would be able to fool them completely anyway. What was important was that the villagers didn't know that he was using unknown magic and skills. Earth attribute magic and water attribute magic alone would be sufficient to dig a well. I'm in the middle of cooking creating a shrine to Vida would be more than enough repayment," Vandali told them. "Understood. We shall build a church once the village is prospering." "No, a shrine is enough." The village's water shortage had been more severe than Vandali had expected. Apparently they would have had to think about abandoning the village within the next few years if the situation hadn't improved. "So, Vandali-sama, where are you headed now?" "The last village, the second cultivation village." Vandali was using flight to travel while talking to Eleonora and the others through the communication magic item, the shrunken goblin head. "Pardon me for asking, but why are you helping the cultivation villages, Vandali-sama?" Eleonora asked. "Your objective is to register at the Adventurers Guild, isn't it?" She seemed to be unable to understand why Vandali was going around helping the cultivation villages. "Don't say that," said Zran. "Helping people is a good thing, isn't it?" "You're doing great, King," said Braga. "By the way, my encounter, if you stand out too much, you will be noticed by the vampires who worship Hihirishukaka," said Eleonora. "I think you shouldn't do anything unnecessary." Zran had always thought favorably of the people in the Hartner Duchy that had done trade with Talersheim. To be more precise, The people of the cultivation villages were originally refugees from the Sauron Duchy, but he didn't seem to be interested in making this distinction. But Eleonora was advocating that Vandali should quickly register at the Adventurers Guild. Vandali shouldn't endanger himself to help people who weren't even citizens of Talersheim at no benefit to himself. This was an extremely sensible viewpoint. In fact, most people passing by would think, "Oh my, how troublesome," and then be on their way. Of course, mages capable of using healing magic might have saved Ivan in the 7th cultivation village. But would a mere passerby with no obligations to do anything, who wasn't even an adventurer, have gone to the 5th cultivation village afterwards? And would they have thought about going around to the other cultivation villages after that? Use from helping the people of the cultivation villages. He gained the thanks and respect of the poor people, lodging and meals at Groot inns, and verbal promises that shrines would be built in Vida's name. None of these contributed towards the accomplishments of his goals at all. Registration as an adventurer could be done without getting involved with the people of the cultivation villages, and his registration wouldn't be rejected because he hadn't helped the people before registering. Popularity among the lowest commoners wasn't really taken into account for people becoming noblemen, so not having such popularity wouldn't be a problem at all. Helping the people wouldn't be of any help for resurrecting Darsa or getting revenge on Heinz and the others, either. That was why Eleonora thought that rather than gaining anything in return, he was actually simply increasing the chances of being noticed by enemies, the vampires who worshipped evil gods. That's true, but if I am able to help them, it's better to help them, isn't it? When Vandali was asked to explain it, this was what it came down to. It's said that the good you do to others is good that you do to yourself. If I do good deeds like this, I'm sure it will come back to me and good things will happen for me as well. Is that how it is? For Eleonora, with her sense of values and previous experiences, Vandali's reasoning could be said to be the reasoning of a foolish, soft-hearted person. But Vandali was firm in his response. That's how it is. He believed in the unsightliness, foolishness, evil intentions and wickedness of people. He even thought that these were what made people people, and he couldn't deny that he had these qualities as well. However, unsightliness had a counterpart in beauty, foolishness in wisdom, evil intentions in good intentions, wickedness in virtue. These concepts came into existence because their counterparts also existed. If the entire world was unsightly, foolish, filled with evil intentions and wicked, words to describe these wouldn't exist. All of these negative qualities could simply be described as normal, ordinary, common, and average. That was why people having beauty, wisdom, good intentions and virtue was a fact that could not be doubted. Therefore, it could also be said that Vandali believed in the beauty, wisdom, good intentions and virtue of people as well. I don't intend to say that it's the responsibility of people with power, or anything like that. I dislike that way of thinking as well. All I want is to become happy, so I'm simply making others a little happier as well. But what about the vampires? After hearing all of this, Eleonora interpreted Vandali's way of thinking. The idea that if everyone is smiling, that will make you smile as well, that a young child might be taught, was something that would only be applied to those other than enemies. If that was the case, she would be able to understand to some extent. She would still think of Vandali as soft-hearted, but she herself had originally been an assassin sent to kill Vandali. She was only alive and present here because of that soft-hearted way of thinking. Even so, Eleonora expressed that she would still like Vandali to think more about the danger of being noticed by the vampires, but Vandali gave her a carefree response. It's still alright. Even Gubman and the others who worship High-High-Ushukaka, the most influential vampires in this continent, wouldn't have the organizational capability to have informants in recently constructed cultivation villages. It will be a while before traveling merchants start coming to these villages, and even longer before news of me reaches the towns. Then I suppose that's fine, but then should we come close to those cultivation villages as well? Asked Zran. Please make sure you aren't seen by the people of the village, said Vandali. King Mylef, also, make sure you ask about our descendants and Leviasama if you can, Zran reminded Vandali. Okay. But I don't think the people in the villages would know anything about them. When Vandali arrived in the final village, the second cultivation village, there was no traveling merchant trying to poison the villagers, bandits trying to sneak inside, orcs sent by a tamer or anything of the sort. However, instead of a sudden crisis, a long-term crisis had apparently been ongoing for a long time. The first year was good, but the amount of rice we harvest has been decreasing year after year. We have been improving the land and such, but at this rate, not only will we be unable to pay taxes in 3 years' time, but we may even have people die of starvation in this year's winter. "O familiar spirit Sama of Elder, please save this village." Following the lead of the dwarf chief of the village, the masses of villagers lowered their heads towards Vandali. Was it really appropriate that they had begun treating him like a familiar spirit right away simply because he had descended from the sky just as they were offering prayers for an abundant harvest? Well, I'll do what I can, but also, I'm a damp who believes in Veda. I'm not a familiar spirit of Elder, Vandali told them. Like the other cultivation villages that Vandali had visited, there were only shrines to Elder in the second cultivation village. Had that priest of Elder in the seventh cultivation village been particularly zealous with his missionary work? Leaving that aside, with the problem simply being a poor harvest, the things that Vandali could do were limited. First, he went to have a look at the fields. Incidentally, the fields were unflooded, dry fields. Having a rough look with the knowledge and instincts from his farming skill, the rice plants did indeed look weak to Vandali. There was plenty of water, and the plants didn't look like they were affected by disease. As Vandali went to lick the soil and examine the soil's composition by taste, there was a weak reaction from his danger sense, death spell. Could it be poison? Vandali wondered. Disinfect. The reaction disappeared from the soil immediately. It seemed that there were substances harmful to the body present in the dirt. The detoxification spell worked on the rice plants, so it seemed that this really was the cause of the poor harvest. But why is the poison in the soil? This was strange. The soil of this village seemed to be the same as the soil of the other cultivation villages. If the poison had mixed into the water used to irrigate the fields, danger sense, death would have reacted to the irrigation channels as well. Have you been using a special fertilizer? Vandali asked, but everyone, including the village chief, shook their heads. We're using compost made from plant and wood ash and human waste. But the other cultivation villages should be doing the same, said the chief. Archie, there was one time where the gentleman from the Knight's Order came to train and brought some insecticide for us as well, wasn't there? Said his son. Now that you mention it, you are right. That was the Knight's Order led by the Duke's eldest son, Prince Lucas, was it not? But he apparently delivered the same insecticide to the other cultivation villages. The conversation between the dwarf village chief and his son, who couldn't be told apart other than by whether their hair and beards were black or white, didn't make anything clear. Well, the insecticide was suspicious no matter how Vandali thought about it, but he couldn't think of a reason for the Knight's Order spreading poison only on the fields of this cultivation village. As long as there weren't any strange familial conflicts happening, anyway. If I recall, the cultivation project was started by the second son, Belton, and the leader of the Knight's Order is the oldest son, Lucas. The traveling merchant, the bandits, the tamer and this village's fields. I have a bad feeling about this. Even if there was a familial conflict, why were the conspiracies targeting poor people like these on the edge of the region? It would be better off if they were just have bloody conflicts between family members in their own castles and mansions. For now, I've erased the poison in the soil of the fields and the rice plants, Vandali told the villagers. He might have erased the evidence as well, but the culprit would likely have the backing of an influential person, so it would probably be pointless to preserve the evidence anyway. The villagers cheered, but Vandali questioned whether this was really a great achievement. Even with the poison erased, if there was a poor harvest due to cold weather, pests or disease, there would be no change to the fact that people would die of starvation in the winter. Wasn't there some way to improve the food situation of the village? If he spread his mana into the fields, the beans planted in the ridges between the rice fields might turn into monster plants, so some other method. As Vandali thought about it, he suddenly had an idea. Perhaps because there had been a goblin king, there were more goblins near the village than usual. And if he looked for gobaba grass, he could quickly obtain some. Now then, everyone, I'll teach you a way to make goblins not taste terrible, so you can use them as food in emergencies, he announced. He would create the emergency rations of ghouls, Gobu Gobu. Chapter 72, The Man Who Wants a Fourth Time. One person, to start things off, whispered Rod Corty, who had been watching events in Origin. Kaido Kanata had died. With his death, unrest had begun to stir among the reincarnated individuals gathered under Amamiya Hiroto's leadership. It was likely that some would begin to leave his organization soon. And soon, at least a dozen of them, perhaps even up to half of them, would lose their lives. Rod Corty had taken a lot of things into consideration so that they wouldn't die easily, but he hadn't made them invincible or immortal. There could be incidents where they would die at each other's hands like Kanata had. At the very least, Kaido Kanata and Amamiya Hiroto wouldn't be the only two who were unable to live out their natural lifespans in Origin. This is Sheet. That damn Mari, she actually killed me, didn't she? Shouted Kanata, having appeared before Rod Corty and regained his senses. Come to think of it, he was shouting when he came here, too, Rod Corti remembered. Hey, God, said Kanata, calling out to Rod Corti. I'm begging you, give me one more chance. I hadn't even turned 30 yet. Wasn't that life just too short? It seemed that Kaido Kanata was more rational. He was asking Rod Corti to give him another life. Rod Corti thought that Kanata's 2 lives of over 40 years when combined wasn't that short, however. There were those who died immediately after birth, or even before birth, after all. And it was almost certain that there was no small number of people under the age of 30 who had been killed by Kanata himself in origin, including the terrorists he had killed right before his own death. Please. I'll do anything. Kanata begged. That cannot be done. It has already been decided that I will have you live a 3rd life, Rod Corti told him as he instantaneously communicated knowledge about the world of Lambda and the circumstances requiring people to be reborn there, just as he had done with Vandali. Kanata stiffened in surprise for a moment, but then began speaking dejectedly. God, I did ask you to give me another chance, but can't you give me one in some other world? He asked. Do you not like Lambda? It is a world of swords and magic that you all love so much. There are even dragons, said Rod Corti. No, there's no way I'd take a liking to a world officially recognized by a god to be an inferior world, is there? Said Kanata. I've had enough of being extraordinary in origin and development of the world. I don't want to do something as difficult as that, either. If you make use of your power, you should be able to live life like royalty and nobles, and even acquire a harem, Rod Corti told him. Do you still feel that way, despite this? Even if I live like royalty and nobles, there's no electricity or internet, is there? I'm not interested in a harem. I'd be satisfied with playing around with a single woman multiple times. Kanata was more disinterested in being reincarnated in Lambda than Rod Corti had imagined. With that said, he had no choice. His reincarnation could not be prevented at this point. Wait, does that mean Mari is going to be reincarnated in Lambda as well? Asked Kanata. Strength had suddenly returned to his voice, but Rod Corti had a bad feeling about this. Yes. Then this time, I'm going to kill that woman. I'm not going to let my guard down, I'm definitely going to have my revenge. So, this is how it turns out in the end, Rod Corti thought in exasperation. With the memories and personality of previous lives preserved, the grudges of the previous lives seemed to follow them as well. With that said, if either their previous memories or their personality was erased, their minds would become unstable. If both were erased, there wouldn't be any point in reincarnating them at all. Something as skillful as erasing only the memories of the grudge was difficult for Rod Corti to do. He was a specialist of the soul, not the mind. Although minds and souls are intimately connected, they are deceptively dissimilar. As Rod Corti had programmed the series of reincarnations when the 100 people had died on Earth, it wasn't even possible for him to take his time to erase memories now. However, this might be perfect. Unlike Vandali, Kanata had only one target for revenge, and Rod Corti had a problem that needed to be taken care of swiftly. Perhaps it would even be easier to request this of Kanata because of his overflowing murderous intent. Before that, I have something I want to request of you, said Rod Corti. What is it, God? I, Kanata-sama, first casualty of the Bravers, will do anything you wish for, as long as it isn't troublesome. No, you are not the first to perish among those who reincarnated in that world, Rod Corti told him. The first casualty was Amamiya Hiroto. Amamiya Hiroto? That guy died? No, not him. Not him, but Amamiya. There was a guy like that? This was the extent of Kaido Kanata's perception of Amamiya Hiroto. They had been in different classes in high school, and Amamiya Hiroto had always been alone, with as much presence as empty air. Kanata didn't remember him at all. Come to think of it, I did hear that there were 2 people who declined to be reincarnated and one of them had a similar name to Amamiya Hiroto. I think his woman had forgotten about it for a while. Naru's Narumi. As she had been popular in her class, even Kanata had remembered her despite being in a different class. She had approached Amamiya thinking that he was the reincarnation of Amamiya, and they had apparently quarreled once they realized that it was a misunderstanding, but after various events, they had ended up together and gotten married. Remembering the beginning of their relationship, Kanata realized that Amamiya Hiroto was the guy with the similar name. I will give you information regarding him, said Rod Corti. No, I don't really want it, you are. That guy was that undead? Jesus. Kanata shouted. What is it? No, not you. Receiving a direct stream of information from Rod Corti once more, Kanata couldn't help but scream as he realized that the undead in origin, the only being in the world capable of using death attribute magic, was Amamiya Hiroto, and that he had already been reincarnated in Lambda. At this rate, wouldn't he kill for revenge before he could take his own revenge? Oi, cancel this reincarnation. There's no way I can win against a monster like that on my own, is there? Or at least wait until the others die and come to this place," said Kanata. That undead, Amamiya Hiroto, was such an abnormal being that Kanata had completely changed his views and taken back his words. First of all, Amamiya could permanently surround himself with barriers that nullified physical and magical energy while still allowing him to attack from his side. It wouldn't be anything like the comics where a hole in the barrier would appear while he was attacking, either. And he was even constantly releasing lethal poison, disease and mold. It would be impossible to approach him without something like a spacesuit. If this was all, Kanata could penetrate these with his cheat-like ability. But in the laboratory in Origin, guards who had tried to run had gone mad and begun clawing their own eyeballs out while laughing. Research assistants had been turned into mummies instantaneously, and a female researcher who had begged for her life was eaten from the inside out by insect-like creatures. Amamiya Hiroto possessed numerous methods of attacking that were still unknown. Without knowing what needed to be penetrated, Kanata's ability would be useless. Amamiya Hiroto was a being that couldn't be described as anything other than a natural enemy to the living. Despite that, there were records that he had conducted a strange rescue mission where he kicked down the doors of the confined rooms of the other experimental subjects and destroyed the control devices that had been implanted into their bodies. Considering that he had acted like he wanted to be killed by the Bravers in the end, that undead might have still had some humanity left in him. Though this was accurate, it wasn't the complete truth, either. That undead, like Kanata and the others, had been reincarnated from Earth. "I want you to kill Amamiya Hiroto, who calls himself Vandali in Lambda," said Rod Corti. "I'm telling you, it's impossible." Kanata protested. "Currently, he is weaker than when he was an undead in Origin," Rod Corti explained. "You should be able to defeat him, even on your own." "Are you serious?" Rod Corti told Kanata everything he knew about Vandali. But as it was clearly inadvisable to tell a mortal being about the existence of the Circle of Transmigration system, he kept quiet about Vandali's ability to break souls. He decided to use the fact that Vandali wanted to kill all of those reincarnating on Lambda as the reason he wanted Vandali dead. Also, it would be problematic if he feels afraid again upon hearing that his soul could be broken. This was part of Rod Corti's calculations as well. Kanata, on the other hand, after hearing the gist of the situation though not the whole picture, began to think, is this guy an idiot? Regarding Rod Corti. Instead of doing troublesome things like cursing Vandali and trying to drive him to suicide, why hadn't he tried to calm him down after he died in Origin? At the very least, that was what Kanata would have done. There should have been various other options, such as having Vandali reborn into a prosperous family, giving him proper cheat-like abilities this time, or offering him a harem like he had offered Kanata. In any case, Kanata understood the situation. He wasn't particularly enthusiastic about it, and he felt sympathy for Vandali. But at the same time, he thought that this was a chance for himself. "Hey, I don't mind disposing of this Vandali, but only on 2 conditions," he told Rod Corti. "Conditions?" Rod Corti repeated. "Isn't it obvious? I'm cleaning up after your mistakes, after all," said Kanata. "I believe that this is also for your own protection as well, is it not?" Rod Corti pointed out. "I don't really mind begging him to spare my life. I'll lick his shoes or feet and say, I didn't know anything." Nobody could go against what Amamiya Hiroto and Indukuya's orders. "I'll tell you anything you want to know, so please just spare my life. If I do that, he'll probably forgive me, right?" He seemed quite kind, too. Vandali had rescued the other experimental subjects. No matter how Kanata looked at it, he was probably a soft-hearted person. Upon hearing Kanata say this, Rod Corti stayed silent for a few moments and then prompted Kanata to continue. "What are your conditions?" Rod Corti asked. "First of all, I want a reward," said Kanata. "If I dispose of Vandali successfully, reincarnate me on Earth or another world with a similar scientific civilization, a world without magic or monsters, with my current memories and personality. Of course, I mean excluding Origin. Make it so that I'm born into a rich, blessed family. Also, I want to be a man with unrivaled handsome looks this time." "So, you are asking me for a 4th life?" Rod Corti asked. "But does that not mean that you have to die on Lambda? Then I just have to die, right? After I dispose of Vandali, I'll just hurry up and die as well. I have no interest at all in living a life in an inferior world. Once I do my job, I'll kill myself right away, be reincarnated in a pleasant world similar to Earth, be a son of a rich, distinguished family and live an enjoyable life until I die. I'll take my sweet time, while the others are doing their hardest to live in a piece of shit world." These thoughts of Kanata's were clear to Rodcorti, but Rodcorti had little interest in his thoughts and didn't feel the need to blame him for having these thoughts, either. This was because Rodcorti knew that Kanata hadn't contributed much to the development of Origin, so he wouldn't be of much use in Lambda either. Kanata was simply a single disposable card with nothing other than his abilities in battle. As long as he could solve Rodcorti's problems, his life was a small price to pay. And the reward that Kanata desired was the kind of reward that Rodcorti could easily give him. "Very well," said Rodcorti. "I promise you that reward. So, what is your other condition?" he asked. "Your backup, of course," said Kanata. "Make it so that I'm reincarnated in Lambda in an adult's body. Instead of reincarnating normally." "Of course. How many years are you planning to wait before having this job completed?" Even with Kanata's abilities in combat, including his particularly exceptional ability when fighting other humans, it would still be impossible for him to complete this request with the body of a baby or infant. It would take over a dozen years for him to become able to move and act freely away from his parents, possibly even up to 15 or 20 years. But if he had an adult's body to begin with, he would have an advantage over Vandali, who was still a child. He wouldn't have any troublesome parents, so he would be able to act freely. And having to live for over a decade in such an inferior world was something that Kanata wanted to avoid. "Very well," said Rodcorti. "I will have to use some of my power, but it is not impossible." Even considering the aforementioned benefits, this would cause problems for Rodcorti and he would normally be reluctant to do it, but there was no choice. "Well then, I'll need resistances against poison, disease and the death attribute as well," said Kanata. "Also, if by some tiny chance I get killed, recover my soul quickly so that I don't become an undead. Things have been arranged so that the souls of you people, those that I reincarnated, will always return to my side," said Rodcorti. Amamiya Hiroto's transformation into an undead was an exception caused by his own magic. "I will make it so that you can acquire resistance skills against poison, disease and the death attribute. As a resistance skill against the death attribute is normally impossible for humans to acquire, the maximum I can give you is a level 5 skill, however." "Skills?" Kanata repeated. "In Lambda, there are skills and jobs, and you can see these displayed on your status," Rodcorti explained. "What the hell is that? It's just like a game, isn't it?" said Kanata. "Isn't it because you're playing around like that that the world isn't developed? So, is there anything else you need?" Rodcorti asked, ignoring these words. "Equipment, I suppose. A gun, a knife." "Wait," said Rodcorti. "It is impossible to take things that do not exist in Lambda. Are you serious? I can't even take just one sniper rifle? Why did you think that I would allow this?" "Tch." Kanata clicked his tongue loudly, having thought that it would be easy mode with a long-distance sniper shot. But even Rodcorti had no choice but to refuse this request. In the first place, if such a thing was even possible, he would have sent items from other worlds to Lambda in large quantities long ago. He wasn't doing so because it was impossible with the power he possessed. In the end, Rodcorti was nothing more than the god of the circle of transmigration. "Then can I at least ask for some clothes?" said Kanata. "Surely you're not going to tell me to be reborn completely nude? Everyone is normally born naked," Rodcorti pointed out. "But I understand, I will adjust things so that they work out. Now then, you must encounter Vandali, so your destiny must stop right there," said Kanata, interrupting him. "Adjust that destiny thing, too. Give me something like a radar so that I don't encounter him at a time that I would never expect." So many requests, Rodcorti thought, but he acknowledged this request anyway. In fact, an adjustment like this wasn't very difficult to make. A radar that detects the owner of powerful death attribute mana, and an altered destiny so that you encounter him. "I shall make that adjustment." "All right, there are no more problems now," said Kanata. It seemed that he was out of requests. "Now then, I shall have you reborn in Lambda," said Rodcorti. "After you are reincarnated, I recommend that you register at the Adventurers Guild or some other guild, acquire a job, and learn how to use skills while increasing your level and attribute values. I'm telling you, I don't need to play around with that stuff." "I'll get rid of him quickly even without doing that," said Kanata as he was reincarnated. In front of the people of the second reclamation village, with various items prepared in front of him, Vandali began cooking. He felt like he was teaching them how to prepare 3-minute meals. "The first things you need to have ready are goblin meat and gobaba grass," Vandali told them. "You can use any part of the goblin, whether it be the chest, legs or the heart, and you should try to have at least one whole goblin's worth. Their livers are fine as well. As for the gobaba grass, an amount equal to about half the weight of the meat you're using is just right." As he pointed to the mountain of goblin meat and gobaba grass, the villagers let out groans of disgust. Although the meat of humanoid monsters such as orcs was eaten in Lambda, goblins and gobaba grass weren't even considered low-quality products, they were simply garbage to be thrown out. The villagers couldn't be blamed for reacting this way. Next, grind the gobaba grass, Vandali continued. During this process, the grass lets out bad-smelling juices that leave stains on clothes, so take care not to dirty yourself. I have prepared a special mortar for crushing the gobaba grass in this case, so I will be using this. There was a stir in the crowd as Vandali brought out a mortar that he had made during the night using Glum transmutation. They were surprised at the fact that this mortar that even an adult would have a hard time carrying around was being lifted easily by Vandali, a child. But Vandali interpreted this as his mortar being popular. He mashed the gobaba grass, the unpleasant-smelling juices gathering in a bucket that he had placed beneath their mortar. After that, cut the goblin meat into appropriately sized pieces. I don't have a blade, so I'll be using my own claws, but I've cleaned them properly, so rest assured, said Vandali, cutting the meat with his claws. The villagers groaned once more. After the meat is cut, place it in a barrel with the grass juice, he continued. In this case, let us take care to make sure that the meat is submerged in the grass juice. Place a lid on top, leave it for a day and it is complete. For this demonstration, I have prepared the completed product. When did you do that? A perceptive villager asked. I used my familiar spirit powers to prepare it, Vandali replied. He couldn't tell the villagers that he had actually used the inanimate aging spell to turn it into a one-day-old state, so he deceived them forcibly. This is the finished gobu, he said. Please go ahead and try some. He opened the barrel and placed some of its contents, which resembled purple meat, onto plates. Seeing this, the villagers instinctively took a step back. This was the normal reaction for anyone being told to eat purple meat. Is this really edible? The village chief asked. Of course, said Vandali. Shall we eat it together? No. Eat a darky, monsieur. The village chief took a piece of gobu and shut his eyes tightly as he bit into it. But as he continued chewing several times, his frowned eyebrows began to relax. This is not delicious, but it is not unpleasant and there is no sting, he commented. Hearing the village chief say this, the villagers timidly placed the gobu into their mouths. Indeed, as Oyajidono says, this flavor is not inedible. No, isn't this much better than the tree bark dango and grass soup that we ate during the winter? You're right. This is much more delicious than those. They've had some crazy diets in the past. Hearing the villagers say that the gobu wasn't bad and that it was actually delicious, Vandali felt sympathy for them from the bottom of his heart. But the substitute meals that they had eaten during the winters with poor harvests, the nutrient-devoid things that they had eaten to stave off their hunger, were indeed far more unpleasant tasting than gobu. Yeah, it tastes far better than eating goblin meat as it is, said a villager who, in his hunger, had apparently eaten the meat of a goblin he had exterminated before. Struggling with poor harvests, these people had really barely managed to survive. If a slave trader had visited the village, they might have even sold their children to avoid letting them starve to death. It was at this point that Vandali had come and taught them how to make preserved food from goblin meat, which they normally had no choice but to throw away, and gobu grass. As it did contain meat, it should provide far greater nutrition than tree bark. There was no way that the villagers wouldn't be happy about this. If you just build a shrine to Vida now, I'll throw in 20 mortars and wooden barrels, as well as salt that will improve the taste if you apply it before submerging the goblin meat in the grass juice, said Vandali. What do you say? Gladly. We shall devote ourselves to Vida. A villager exclaimed. No, you don't have to go as far as devoting yourselves, Vandali began. To think that you would even give us precious salt. Truly, thank you very much, said another villager. One villager was in tears. I held myself back from building a shrine because of the Lord and the priest Sama, but I have still been praying for a long time. My prayers really did reach Vida Sama. Out of sympathy, Vandali had gone and taken out the salt that he had brought from Taylorsheim to use to pay toll fees. There was still rock salt available there and he had already acquired coins from the bandits, so it probably wouldn't be a problem, however. Incidentally, Vandali had asked the villagers about this, having felt curious about their words, and apparently, in the Sauron Duchy, Vida's religion had been more prominent than Elders. When he looked at the people of the cultivation villages, he had seen more humans than any other race, and there had been no dark elves. But there was quite a number of beast people and titans in the villages. However, in the Hartner Duchy that had welcomed them, most of the noblemen, including the Duke, were believers of Alder and his subordinate gods, and it was the Church of Alder that was flourishing in this duchy. The shrines that had been built by the soldiers in the cultivation villages were shrines to Alder, and it was a priest of Alder, the one in the 7th cultivation village, who came to this area to preach. While it wasn't expressly forbidden, the people had felt pressure and decided not to build shrines to Vida and other gods as they had done in their lost homelands. I've learned another unpleasant truth. This weighed a little heavy on Vandal's mind, but what he was more anxious about was the first Princess Lovia, who was supposed to have evacuated Taylorsheim, as well as the other refugees, including Borkus's daughter. Would they still be living in this duchy, where the religion of Alder had become so powerful? Or perhaps they had relocated to another duchy? It would be best to quickly head to the city and investigate. I'm worried about these cultivation villages, but I suppose I'll station lemures around them. Also, I'll bury some stone golems nearby. If I carve Vida's holy symbol on their chests, the villagers will think of them as allies, I guess. This would probably be fine. I finally caught up to you. After Vandali had spent several days mass-producing lemures and deploying them to every village, Kasim's party and the priest approached him with haste. They had been in the 7th cultivation village. What were they doing in the 2nd cultivation village now? I hadn't thought that you would be going around every cultivation village, said Kasim. Come back, everyone's been worried about you, said Festa. The day after you took Kine and flew off, we headed to the 5th cultivation village, Kasim told him. Was their friend who had come from the Sauron duchy like them safe? What about the person who had saved their lives? Kasim's party and the priest, the 4 of them, had hurried to the 5th cultivation village to find out. What they had found was Kine and the other villagers, discussing where in the village a shrine to Vida should be constructed. After that, we heard that you'd flown off to another cultivation village and chased you. Seriously? Who the heck are you? You're too incredible, said Kasim. That's right, we'd been worried that you and Kine might have fallen down somewhere along the way, but in the end, it turned out that you'd gone around to all of the cultivation villages, said Festa. And you did incredible deeds to save people in all of the villages, said Zeno. We were wondering if we were chasing a saint or something. Right, Priest Sama? You are absolutely right, the priest agreed. He was wearing a strangely stiff expression as he wiped the sweat from his forehead with his sleeve. He showed more human weakness than when he was wearing his shallow smile. The day before yesterday, I said that we should strive to do good deeds together, but perhaps I should be the one asking you for teachings, he said. How in the world did you cure all of the villagers of disease, heal a burn that would be difficult to treat even with specialist healing techniques, and dig a well in the blink of an eye? I have also heard that diseases were cured by holy droplets produced by your hands. Please tell me. Wow, I did some amazing things, didn't I? Vandali thought, now that the priest was asking him all of these questions. He did think that calling the eye drops that he had secreted from his claws holy droplets was an exaggeration, though. But how should he respond? He couldn't imagine that he could fool the priest by telling him that it was the power of a familiar spirit, but he had no intention of telling him the truth, either. Vandali decided to tell one part of the truth, but keep the rest a secret. I possess a few special skills, he replied. The priest and Kasim's party opened their eyes wide. By special skills, could you possibly mean unique skills? In this world, there are unique skills, such as Vandali's God-Slayer skill. They are various kinds of special abilities and talents, and they are extraordinarily rare. To put it in a ratio, about 1 in 10,000 people possess one. The priest and Kasim's party had misunderstood, thinking that Vandali's various deeds had been possible through such a characteristic skill. What kind of skill could that be? The priest asked, leaning forward in excitement. But Vandali shook his head. I'm someone who is planning to establish myself as an adventurer, so I can't tell you, he said. Do not say that. Please tell me. The priest insisted. I will keep your secret. You can't, Priest Sama. Kasim and his friends stopped the priest from persisting in his questioning. For us adventurers, we make money through our bodies, said Festa. Forcibly asking someone to divulge their skills is a breach of etiquette. That's right, said Zeno. I understand that you're curious, but trying to force Vandali to tell you his skills after he saved everyone goes against our morals. Indeed, as they said, the information displayed on an adventurer's status is that adventurer's weakness as well as his strength. If the adventurer himself is unwilling to divulge that information himself, trying to force it out of him is equivalent to saying, tell me your weaknesses. As Vandali had declared that he would become an adventurer in the future, this applied to him as well. That is true. My apologies, said the priest. Being held back by Kasim and his friends, he reluctantly stepped back. Not at all. It's fine as long as you understand, said Vandali. But if you are capable of such things, I believe that there are many paths of employment to take without having to become an adventurer, said the priest. Why could Vandali see a strange look of ruefulness on the priest's face? He doubted that a traveling priest would have the connections to mediate offers with employers. That might be true, but I'm still inexperienced, said Vandali. Even if I were to enter employment, I want to do it after first becoming an adventurer, expanding my horizons and gaining experience. If he were employed by some noble family or merchant, he would become a vassal or servant and it would become difficult to attain a court rank. Also, he wouldn't be able to quit easily if things became inconvenient, either. He wanted to avoid this. I see. Expanding your horizons is indeed important, the priest agreed. Despite your youth, you have considered this. Yeah, at the very least, he's doing a lot more thinking about his future than Fester, said Kasim. Why are you suddenly mentioning me? Fester protested. Having settled things without having to lie, as his death attribute magic was indeed a skill, Vandali accompanied Kasim and the others back to the 7th cultivation village in a good mood. Suddenly feeling the sensation of having a physical body with no prior warning, Kaido Kanata felt a deep sense of satisfaction and excitement. He felt strength filling the limbs that had previously been powerless, as if he had been in a dream, and he could feel his own heartbeat deep in his chest, full of life. I did it. He shouted as he opened his eyes, but a moment later, he let out a scream. I'm naked after all. Chapter 73, Scum approaching from afar and a scoundrel lurking nearby. I'm naked after all. Kanata shouted, having been reincarnated in Lambda stark naked. But immediately
Yo guys, Shrimp's back. And yeah, I'll end it here for today for the Dead Mage who doesn't want the fourth time. Because if I extend one more, I'll probably end up very late. So yeah, so that's the end for that. But I'm going to continue to talk to you guys and to just finish this final editing of this sketch. Uh, yeah, I got a little bit lazy and just started drawing a Demon Slayer character. So yeah, I guess it's just my other issue with my skill set right now is I'm still not really good in creating something that is purely imagined, not copied. Yeah, probably drawing something copied is much easier for me right now. Uh, but it still turns out very well for the rest of the things that I did that I didn't need any copies with. Mm, yeah, so I'm just gonna finish this Demon Slayer over here. Kanao, yeah. Her name is Kanao. If you've been watching Demon Slayer or Kimetsu no Yaiba, whichever you prefer to call it. And I might say this is one of my favorite animes, favorite mangas that I've been reading. And I enjoy the concept of this story so much that I really went and watched it every week, or read it every week in my uh, in some websites that I've been looking at for comics and manga. It's a really interesting story of a demon slayer who's uh, who got his family, entire family, massacred except for his sister, but his sister also got turned into a demon. Yada yada. Check it out if you want to know more about the story. But yeah, this is one of the characters there. Her name is Kanao. Her abilities is the flower swordsman style. Yeah, I think. Yeah, flower. Flower style. And yeah, she looks really, really cute, but she's really deadly. So I'll just finish this up over here. By the way, about the story right now about the Death Mage who doesn't want a fourth time, it's getting really, really interesting. I'm enjoying already the recap for myself because I've read this before, and getting to this part is remembering some stuff that I've read before also with this. It's really interesting to know more about the the characters again, especially Kairo Kanata right now, is actually speaking some things that are actually actually basically true. Because like what he said when he told uh, Hirish, no, not Hirish, what's his name again? Uh, Rod Cardney, yeah, Rod Cardney, the god who resurrected him. Uh, if he has given Vandally a better life, not just like he just concluded that he would force Vandally to commit suicide, which is really stupid. So yeah, Kanata is actually preaching truths that there. If he has actually given Vandally a better life compared to the ones he has actually experienced from the previous reincarnation that he went through, maybe Vandally would have been a bit more uh, yeah, reluctant to destroy souls or something, or even making Rodgorny his enemy, deciding that he is the uh, an enemy that needs to be defeated and stuff like that. Uh, so right now he's suffering for the consequences of his action, like I said before, of just deciding things without thinking properly what might be the cause of this if he would proceed to this kind of actions. And so right now Vandally is doing really good. He's actually promoting. I really love the fact that he's just like going around every villages and then promoting his religion to them. It reminds me of my past during my missionary days. So it's a very kind of what's the term? Relatable to me. Yeah, it's actually really right because the way you should preach to people is just to act, not act, but show your kindness to them. As kindness is the number one thing that will lead to the hearts of people. So Vandally is technically doing the best job here uh, as a advocate of Vida. Yeah. So Vida's religion is pretty much booming right now due to him. Especially that he's performing miracle after miracle by saving people, also for uh, providing food, providing medicine, and ways for them to have water, that kind of stuff. With that kind of stuff, we no wonder that people would start worshiping him and worshiping what he is believing. So yeah, technically, if you do that something like that, even in the real world, definitely a lot of people will follow you. That's how what happens to other fanatics and stuff like that. So yeah, he's doing a very good job, whatever he's doing right now, to uh, to actually promote his Vedas religion throughout the towns that he's visiting. It's really interesting to see his interaction with these people. It's so like nonchalantly because due to his like not deadpan expression, doing some very miraculous and out of this world kind of stuff that the villagers is just like, whoa, what is this kid? And the people just like mistaking his gender also. It's so funny for me. It's actually you're actually a boy. Man. Yeah, so we'll see more of the shenanigans of what will happen after this. His goals of becoming an adventurer is very solid. By the way, the high priest of the town is really sauce, super sauce. So yeah, let's just watch out for him, because I really don't trust that guy due to his like weird smile that he's giving off. Mhm. So yeah, okay, pretty much this is done. Interestingly, this is Kanao. Oh, I want to add something dangerous there. Oh, here we go. Let's give her an evil look, covered in shadow. Mm, sometimes I wonder if I'm doing. Yeah, I did that right. Okay. I usually don't um, do this right back then, but now, yeah, that looks good. That really looks good. Let's just add some few more shadings over here, and that will complete this. Mm-hmm. Well, well. So kind of giving you that that stare, because she will give you that stare around the end of the arc. Yeah, around the end of the arc of the story. I really like to see this animated because she's giving out this really dangerous stare. It's one of the my favorite parts of this manga. So yeah. Ooh, look at that line art. It's so slick. hmm I hope I did the right thing with the skirt. Mm, yeah, I think there's no issues with that. This Mega Man like girl over here, Mega Man style. Uh, let's see what we can do here. Do we need anything else? I think. Should we put a rocket on her back? A backpack or something? Not really sure. But yeah, here we go. So this is the character sketch style that I've been drawing for a few weeks now. So yeah, one thing I really want to achieve is to get my speed in sketching quicker, faster, and more precise, I think, because my accuracy and my decision making sometimes just hinders me in sketching really quickly, and there's a lot of second guessing in my brain every time that I start sketching. So need some improvements for that. mm, Sorry if you heard that. Anyways, so yeah, if you're wondering what I'm thinking always, if it's like is uh, this skirt was properly, yeah, if it's following the right flow, proportions and stuff like that. The folds, where should I put the folds, where should I put the lines that should be connecting each other, and like something like this. Let's think about this won't work if yeah, now that I'm looking at it, this won't really work in a cape like this. So something, yeah, something straight like that would do. And no, I guess that's right already. Okay. mm-hmm. Yeah, and sometimes when I'm even just completely blanking out, because there's sometimes that I do that when I'm sketching. If I'm doing just the same thing over and over again, sometimes I black out and just I didn't realize that I already made a mistake. So I just double check again, look at the stuff if I'm done something wrong, something to improve, or things that I've missed. So yeah, I know that's the proper way to do it, and that's why I make sure to do it. But sometimes also it hinders me to just sketch really quickly, because I could do it back then, just like sketch so super quickly. But yeah, my proportions were suffering really bad, and my ideas for the attire just It's just garbage. So yeah, this is why my sketches right now are so slow, because I always second guess myself, thinking of ways to improve things. And you will too if you're starting to improve your sketch style, and there are some a lot of ideas that you want to apply. My problem is that a very a big of a uh, attention for detail kind of a guy. I like seeing some more lines and something that is already just a very simple cloth. Like for example, this. If you look at some, rather than I ask you to look it up, I will just show it to you. Where is it? Here we go. So this is the sample I was following in Pinterest. Yeah, if you see that, there's just like less folds happening in the clothes. But if you look at mine's right now, yeah, there's quite a bit of folds over here and there, and yeah, it just takes a lot of effort. I know sometimes I s- I'm not supposed to do that, and but sometimes my desire to put some details just wants over me, and that's something I'm trying to make sure to improve to myself, because detail is not really the pinnacle of way of like making design. It's just another way of art, and if it's hindering you to be faster or something, or sometimes it does hinder you to creating some just simple but attractive art, because I've seen some very detailed art also, but they're not attracted to me, and I do not like those kind of style or something. But they have really wonderful details if you zoom in and see the how detailed the stuff is. But if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, kind of thing. Mm. But for me right now, I think this is a big of a success, creating all of the sketches. I might add some few colors of this in the coming days. I don't know. Before I move on. But yeah, definitely next week I'll move on to the next sketch. Will be animals with more like cyborg animals or android animals. Depends. Excuse me. So, oops. So yeah. Anyways, uh, what else? Mm, so let's see what. So from this sketch of me creating some random shapes and forming them together to look like a human shape, and then starting sketching over them using just a simple uh, pencil tool, and yeah, sketching it. I just realized that the dwarf is so yabai. But yeah, okay, here we go. So this is the final one. I shouldn't have added this shading. I should have just kept it simple, because it's just a small sketch. Mm, I think my number one favorite here will still be the skinny guy. I was not really expecting it to be like that, because I just randomly sketched this really like a mango like face, and then stick kind of almost like stick kind of limbs and body. But then I started sketching it like that, and then the line art, yeah, just perfect. I didn't expect it to look this cool. His coat, man. Oh, always wish to have those kind of coats. But sadly, in my place, the weather is so hot, so now, it won't be happening. That's why I really want to go to travel the world and try some very unique outfits also, so that um, just to learn the culture and enjoy this kind of outfits. Yeah. The second will be probably this old man over here. Kind of went through a very more caricature kind of style. hmm I think I was thinking of a farmer with a kind of a Master Roshi kind of a vibe. hmm With a straw hat. Speaking of straw hat, it just reminds me also of it. Monkey D. Luffy. Mm. Next will be Miss Coroni over here. Yeah, the the look overall for this is like a model to me, so it gives me a really good vibe drawing this. She's really easy to draw, so I didn't kind of struggle for this. It was really quick, I think, when finishing this up. Mm, for Mega Man Girl over here, yeah, I wasn't really feeling it with her. Yeah, sometimes like that. I had an idea, tried it, and but doesn't really work out as I was thinking or was imagining. But I tried my best to make it look cute, look cool. But yeah, I should have went for a more classy style rather than this futuristic style. Maybe that would have worked for me, for her, because right now I don't really like how I did this. But I did my best to make it look cute or better than what I was originally was thinking of this when I just like started sketching or something. Mm, but yeah, the witch is really cool. I think I can probably sell this to a card game or something. Put this, slap this on a Yu-Gi-Oh card or something, and then yeah. The panda mech, or android. Oh no, not an android. Cyborg. There we go. And panda cyborg. She would probably fit in cyberpunk or something. If cyberpunk and what you call this? What was the game again? Blizzard's game. World of Warcraft. Yeah. If World of Warcraft and Cyberpunk had a baby, maybe this. uh, the ogre. Yeah, still have some issues with the arms a bit. Still don't know how to like process good and bulky muscles. Probably that's what will be my next project after the cyborg dogs, cyborg animals. Try to just master some muscle stuff, because yeah, that really defines how good of an artist you are if you can like memorize the muscle patterns, the anatomy of a human being, especially bulky creatures. Uh, yeah. So, anyways, pretty much this is the wrap for this session. Mm, should I show you guys the? Oh no, probably next time. I'll show you some of the fan arts next time. Uh, I mean the illustration, not fan arts. Illustration arts for the that Mage who doesn't want a fourth time, because I think there are some few more stuffs that we haven't seen yet that I would like to show you guys about what's happening with the story, some illustrations to show us how the world is building up already and how the characters look like. That would be interesting to show to you guys if you're watching this. Okay. Still can't get over to this guy. This is so cool. Uh, oops. I think I missed this part. There we go. Yeah. And yeah, so let's wrap this up for today. Thank you guys for watching this stream of minds with me sketching and you listening to some wonderful stories from the That Mage Doesn't Want to Afford Time chapters. What chapter are we? Okay, so 73, 72, and 71. Yeah, I think we went from 69 also. Sorry, I can't remember where we started. But anyways, yeah, so that was the story overall for today and the art style for today and the sketching. And I hope to see you guys next time again. If you've enjoyed my content here, please leave a like and subscribe in my channel so that you can help me out. That will really be very wonderful for them to my channel, and I would really appreciate it. And also, uh, check out some of the stuff in the Novels.pl. Such a good website. You won't regret it if you read or listen to the stories in this website. And so yeah, that's pretty much it. Uh, Tomorrow depends if I can stream again. I'll be going out for a bit, buying stuff, probably watch a movie. Then if I can go home early, maybe I could stream again. But if not, I'll probably do some of my side jobs before heading out, and pretty much. And the next day, I'll probably play my Monster Hunter Rise because it's been a while since yeah, it's been a week, I may say, that we haven't touched Monster Hunter Rise. So you guys should look forward to that because I'm gonna go and play this coming Sunday. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Thank you again, guys, for watching, and I'll see you guys again next time. This is your boy Shrimp, and see ya. Peace.